RuneQuest has got a really detailed calendar, which
RuneQuest players are all absolutely barking mad.
I think we all know that's true. I think they're even more barking than the rest of us. But yeah, it's a subset.
Your Glorantha may not be quite as crap. Yeah, right.
Brilliant. Let's go at the start. Hi, this is Steve, and here are some more of my gaming vexes. Hello, and welcome to another of my gaming vexes, where we document our ongoing mission to at least play, but preferably run, all of the tabletop RPGs that sit on the shelves in my home office, or Room of Doom as I call it. This time, we look back on all the fun we've been having with the Jackals game, published by Osprey as part of their ever-expanding series of tabletop RPGs. There are currently 3 books in the Jackals line: The Core Rules, a book of additional background and rules called Travellers on the War Road, and a self-styled grand campaign entitled The Fall of the Children of Bronze. And it's this campaign that Andrew, Dave, Kat, Martin and I have been playing through. I'm joined on this episode by the current Jackals crew, but an honourable mention must go to Howard, aka Latix Exile, who set the standard for proper Trouge behaviour, which Martin's character Ocker then set about trampling all over. As you'll no doubt have noticed, this episode is a long one as we go through the core book chapter by chapter and give our thoughts on each. As a special treat, the episode finishes on a high point as Andrew and I chat to John Matthew or JM Defogie, the creator of the world of Jackals. Thanks to JM for his time, and we've included a whole bunch of links to Jackals related material in the show notes. Before we launch into the main part of the episode with an overview of the world of Jackals, I'd like to remind those who might be interested that we have a Patreon. I've updated the benefits for those who sign up at the Woke Turd level. As well as being able to chip in on which games come off the shelf sooner than others, Woke Turds now get the opportunity to pick one of the games I said I'd like to run as a 1 or 2 shot, and I'll then run the chosen game for them and a couple of their friends over Foundry. If playing the game doesn't appeal, we can instead run through how I'd go about setting it up on Foundry, and I can share some of what I loosely term knowledge that I've gained from spending far too much time messing about on the VTT platform. For those who'd rather throw a few pennies our way as and when, we've also set up a Ko-fi. Regardless of whether you choose to support the pod financially or not, the most important thing is that you enjoy what you hear. If you do enjoy it, please consider leaving a positive review on your pod platform of choice, but if you do, please let me know so that I can give you a mention on the show. Anyway, enough of that. It's time for us all to walk the war road. Jackals is a Bronze Age fantasy role-playing game set in Calypsis, an ancient Near East-inspired world. The primary focus of your adventures will be the region known as the Zahharets, or the Land of Risings. This area is a crucial crossroads where 3 large landmasses meet, with a rich history of trade and conflict. The specific coastal stretch of the Zahharets is aptly named the War Road, due to millennia of battles fought upon its plains. The world of Calypsis finds itself grappling with a near-global collapse at the end of an age. This cataclysm occurred 150 years prior to the game's present day, triggered by a monumental slave rebellion called the Uprising. This uprising shattered the monstrous beastfolk kingdom of Barak Barad, also known as the Kingdom of Ignorance, which had brutally enslaved the Luathi people. In the wake of this collapse, humanity is desperately striving to rekindle civilization. The core conflict in Jackals is a cyclical struggle between the forces of law and chaos. Law is embodied by human peoples, their ancestors, gods, and particularly Alwain, the Lord of Law and Creator of the world, who seeks to protect and promote natural order and foster civilization. Opposing them are the forces of chaos, represented by entities like the Takan beastfolk, dark spirits known as Rathic, and other destructive elements that aim to destroy human works and plunge Calypsis back into darkness. This is where you come in. Players step into the role of Jackals, the courageous few who venture beyond the safety of communities into the dangerous wilds of the War Road. You are the scavengers of the dead ruins of lost times. exploring ancient sites, battling Takan tribes, cleansing corrupted areas, and recovering lost lore. While vital for civilization's survival, Jackals are often seen as outsiders by the very societies they protect, due to their dangerous and outcast path. Your ultimate journey is one of aspiring to become a hero of legend, earning your status through trials and challenges. The Zaharets is primarily home to 4 distinct human cultures. The Luathi, known as the Children of Bronze, are the people who led the uprising and now control city-states like Aminawani and Centum. Their faith is primarily Alwainism. The Gerwa, or peoples of the south, hail from the ancient kingdom of Ger, ruled by Kiani, or priest-kings, who claim divine lineage. They are a deeply religious people with a strict caste system. The Melkoni are colonists from the west, who have established the trade colony of Krarila in the Zaharets. They are a people influenced by philosophical reflection and strong passions. Finally, the Trauj, clansmen of the desert and children of giants, dwell on the eastern edge of the Zaharets, in the harsh Luasa desert. They are fierce horsemen, deeply rooted in ancestral stories and the pursuit of Mavok, or glory. Ultimately, Jackals offers a compelling game experience of survival, heroism, and the constant struggle between lore and chaos, in a richly detailed, historically inspired setting. Thanks very much for joining this evening, so we can have a bit of a chat about our experience at playing Jackals. So first of all, let's go around the virtual table and see who we've got. So a little bit about you, your character, and let's think about something else. What's your favourite made-up word out of the Jackals rulebook? Okay, there's a glossary at the back if you're desperate.
Hey, I'm Martin. I've got no idea what my username is on Blue Sky. Been playing for role-playing games for over 30 years, so there you go.
First time on the pod, I think, isn't it?
First time on the pod, yeah. First time on your pod. Yeah, I've done Dave's pod before. But yeah,
everyone's done this pod.
Obviously, you've now at the dregs of the barrel, so thanks very much, Steve. So my character was Ocker, who was a failed Casanova. Liked to hit things, liked to chat up with women badly, but I think everybody loved him, really. And my favourite word, I'm now looking in the glossary, because a lot of the words in the glossary are basically English words, but I like mooly.
Mooly?
And that's the Trauj word for evil, and as I was a Trauj, there you go, they could talk about using the mooly.
Using the mooly. Now we know. Next, when we start playing Jackals again, then we'll use that now.
I'm Kat. I am on Blue Sky as Nevermind Dice Trolls. I've been gaming more years than I really want to count now, to be honest. And I was playing Shuma, our young Luathi Jackal, who really, really wants to build something up to help young Jackals on the road, to make some bit more of an organisation out of it, so that people aren't, blindly necessarily using them all the time. Although I'm not sure that that's coming to pass, really, given the group for the time.
Jackal with ambition.
Oh, a Jackal with ambition. And I think, out of the glossary, my actual favourite word is the name of the game. It's Jackals. I just love the description of it, particularly the part where it says we scavenge from the dead, which we so do when it's the Tekken or anywhere that it's
horrible.
Yeah, okay. Or anything that we can get some kind of treasure out of, because we are paid well, but let's face it, we get far more cash from looting things than we actually do get paid.
My name's Andrew. You can find me on all the usual social media at Zos93. I played Odysseus, the Melkoni Jackal, and my favourite word, I think, is probably Kashir, for the knowledge people.
Yeah, the scribes, the
philosophers and scribes.
Yeah. So my favourite word, so obviously I was reading the game, is Zaharets. That's a great word. The war road, the Zaharets. It's great. We'll probably touch more on the world building in this game, because there's an awful lot of it. Yeah, so today we're going to focus on the core rules. We're going to sort of go through it in a little bit more detail than we would do normally, but we'll refer to other books as we go. But really, we've played quite a bit, actually. I didn't look how many sessions we played, but we played probably about 6 months plus. Howard played as well, so Howard's character Rahif, slightly different sort of Trauj to Ocker. Let's say I had some culture shock when Ocker turned up. That's slightly different.
I think we all did. We were all expecting another taciturn, serious Trauj to turn up, and instead we get someone whose first words to a new Tsar was, "You don't need to do that, love. Be my concubine." It was just,
Yeah, and she was appalled, and I was appalled, frankly. So there you go.
Oh, your face, Steve, was a picture.
I don't know how to handle this stuff. And you'd think after like years of playing with Dave that I'd be, but no, Martin brought a different level. So we're going to go through the book and just essentially just give our thoughts, views on it. I'll say three books rather. The core book, there's the Travellers on the War Road, which we've got sort of halfway through at the moment, and we've sort of paused a little while, but I'm hoping we'll come back to it probably sort of later in the year or early next year. And there's also another book which has got an awful lot of background in some additional rules called Travellers on the War Road. I mean, the first thing I want to say is that, I mean, the books themselves, I mean, it's published by Osprey. Generally, the quality of artwork in Osprey books is great. I think this is exceptional for me. I think the sort of the depictions of the world and depictions of the people is really good, and also the maps they put in there as well. So they put a lot of isometric maps for this, not for every scenario, but for the majority, and those are great. And it really made life a lot easier for me, sort of setting things up on Foundry because it was already pre-set up.
It's good. I think the way it looks, I think the way they've laid everything out actually is pretty good. As with all of these things with games, when you sort of, once you become familiar with it, the layout is good, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
I don't think it's necessarily the easiest thing. There's lots of bits of rules that aren't quite all together.
Yeah.
It does look good. I think, as you said, I think the artwork's very good. The artwork's quite evocative. It kind of draws you in.
Absolutely.
Even the maps and things, I think, draw you in.
The maps.
To that sort of feeling of it being a sort of a Bronze Age kind of game. I think it sets the tone. Yeah, it looks fantastic. It's lovely.
Yeah. And I think Osprey, I mean, if anything, they're going to be good at laying out books, you'd think, because they've been doing it for like, going at 50 years or whatever. But you're right. I mean,
editors, aren't they?
Huh?
They are a publishing house, aren't they?
Yeah, they publish loads of military books, don't they? So, like their Men at Arms series, I remember buying my Sealed Knot Men at Arms series back in 1990 when I was working out my kit for the Sealed Knot. Not Sealed Knot, English Civil War.
Let's not draw a discreet veil over that. That's okay.
Well, everyone else was at like a 28mm pikeman, so like like a figure scale. I was a 15mm pikeman. I was much shorter than everybody else. So
I agree with you. I think the artwork's brilliant, and it flows.
Yeah.
There's no one picture or piece of mapping or art that breaks it. Their art director's done a fantastic job of the whole thing. Just meshes beautifully. So I don't know if anyone really remembers like 3.5 D&D. You had some great art, and then you had some shit art. This is just consistently good art all the way through, and I much prefer that. It all matches, and also. So I really like the fact that even when they've got the text, which is people talking to each other to give you an idea of gameplay, you can read it.
The art's really nice. It's a good variety. There's enough of it. And I also like the size of the physical book.
Yeah.
It's not huge. So it means it's easy to carry around. And it's not 800 pages of densely packed text. It's really quite readable. It's well written.
Yeah.
It has an index which works.
Yeah.
All good stuff. Yeah.
Same. I really like the size of the books. I think the art's really consistent, really nice, consistent style, which I think helps you get into the world, gives you an idea about the world.
Yeah, and I think it's consistent through all the books as well. So they look great on the shelf. I mean, I will say I use the PDF, and the PDFs are generally well bookmarked as well, so you can find a way around fairly easily. I think the only thing that I would add to the core book, not in terms of art necessarily, but just in terms of like an extra part, would be some quick reference sheets. I mean, I make my own anyway for games and I tend to play them, but that's a little bit that's but again, with this game, I think we're talking about even better if, rather than things that we gonna criticize. We don't often get vexed on this podcast despite the name.
Is that do you think due to the lack of GM screen? Because traditionally your GM screen would have all your little guides, wouldn't it? These sort of games that you just don't ever see a GM screen for, which to be fair, we're playing mostly online, so maybe they don't. Maybe they need a virtual equivalent of that.
I was going to say, if I had a sort of minor complaint, it would be about the PDFs and the fact that they don't upload the bits and mortars. This is an Osprey thing. They don't upload bits and mortar, which basically means that you have to, lovely as the books are, you then have to pay extra for the PDFs, and it's not a small sum extra either. They're quite expensive as PDFs go. So that
I waited for the Black Friday sales because I think they were on.
Yeah, but that's an Osprey point rather than anything to do with JM or Jackals in particular. I believe
that is an Osprey
consistent across their game.
All right, so dive straight into the book. So chapter 1 is introduction, okay, and I think for me it sort of immediately answers the question about what do the characters do. So I think in a lot of sort of fantasy worlds is a bit sort of, what the adventurers do is a bit bolted on. Whereas here, from the outset, it's really clear. So you've got this, it's a sort of ancient Near Eastern setting, as far as I understand it. That's the limit of my cultural awareness goes. And then you've got sort of settled cities, towns, and it's very well organised in terms of people, they have a role and you've got the merchants, etc. The Jackals sit outside that. So they've got license to be a bit weird, which is good because Ocker is a bit weird, but they've got license to be that way, and the towns welcome them when there's a problem, but then the rest of the time they go, right, on your bike, because you're not part of our community, so on your way. So I think it sort of really sets that up in terms of what are you doing, and also it sort of gives real license to the fact that the Jackals are going out finding dangerous places and going in there to sort of explore them. I mean, it doesn't hold back on the world building right from the outset. And so I just wonder if, was that because I mean, you ran it as a one shot, so I played in your game before I ran it as a sort of a campaign or a series. I mean, was that a barrier for you when you first picked it up? All that thing about Zaharets and Calypsis and the War Road and like different names for stuff. I mean, it's not quite the level of Skyrims of Jeroen, let's say, but it's
there is that. No, well, what do I think? I think it's probably true of the way that I run games anyway. You take as much out of the setting and the system as you want, and leave the rest.
Yeah.
And the idea is, have fun adventuring. And I think you don't have to explain this setting. Everybody's broadly familiar with the Middle East.
Yep.
Broadly familiar with the historical kind of concept. You kind of understand the Bible, so you've got a pretty decent idea of, the area. You know what the Romans are like, you know what the Egyptians are like, you know what the Greeks are like. So it's fairly easy to get hold of. I think then you don't have to explain everything to everybody. I think you can just, delve in as quickly as you want to.
Quite like the fact that they are set outside, so it does give you that license to be, as you say, a bit weird. I mean, so as Ocker's odd, would not fit in any normal city or village. But so you're not worried about how you would interact on a day-to-day basis with society. So you can do what you like to some extent. So if you really wanted to be a bunch of murder hobos, you could be murder hobos, and it would be in keeping with the setting, as opposed to saying, oh, well, this is my motivation. No, your motivation is you want to defeat chaos and seek glory and wealth.
Yeah,
very basic, really.
Yeah, but we'll come back to it a bit later. But interestingly, the actual game itself starts to draw those characters back into the communities themselves. So it's like a very natural arc, really. So we'll talk more about you can retire characters, and then those characters can carry on. They become NPCs. But good point.
I like the fact that basically you're outsiders, but you've also got your own cultural background as well. So you can have kind of Luathi event if the adventure set in Luathi land, you can have adventurers, Jackals who are Luathi, but they're outsiders of Luathi society. But then you also get, people coming in from like Melkoni and stuff who are outsiders to the society generally as well. So I think it's quite an interesting kind of dynamic.
You've stepped outside of the culture, haven't you?
Yeah.
You've stepped outside of your nation by going and doing something that's kind of frowned at.
Yeah. Frowned at but necessary. Absolutely. It doesn't shy away from, going straight into the cultures in there. So you've got the sort of the four main cultures. You've got the Melkoni, essentially like the Greeks. You've got the Luathi, sort of the Canaanites or the ancient Hebrew. You've got the Trauj, who are sort of... Actually, I can't remember what the Trauj are supposed to be. Are they supposed to be sort of Arabian nomads? Is that their setup?
I think they're desert, aren't they?
Yeah.
And apparently children of giants, mind you, given their height,
but so that sort of plays into the idea that they're perhaps children of the Nephilim or something like that.
Yeah.
So it gives you that feeling that they are outside, they live in the wastes. Proto-Bedouin, potentially.
One thing that's quite nice about being a jackal is even if your background is whichever one of the tribes you pick, because you're outside, it makes it so much easier for a player to develop a character without having to worry about, would a Trauj do that? Would a Luathi do that? Or would a Goa even go there? you don't have to worry about that so much because you're a jackal. You can get away with it. You are outside the normal laws, which does free it up for the characters, for the players playing characters, to be a lot more. You can be more explorative. It's a gentle introduction into the societies rather than having to do it first, like straight off the bat. But as you say, there is an arc to retirement. As you obviously get to time, you probably behave a bit more like your clan would do. But at the beginning, you don't have to do that. So I like that progression that you can learn as a player as you go through.
Yeah.
And that's because it's not so structured, because you're outside society, you can do that.
Yeah. And as I say, this doesn't shy away from the world building, so it goes straight in with, there's an awful lot of game-specific terms in this game. I was listening to another podcast that JM did an interview with, the God Learners podcast, which was great, and he talks about his background as a sort of scholar. But there's a bit of gloranthariness in here, in as much as there's quite a lot of terms you don't need to know them. I mean, teach as a murder hobo game if you want to, but I think a lot of the flavour comes out of that. But I just wonder whether that is or could be a barrier to entry, because it is pretty dense in terms of the world building and the cultures. I don't know what you guys think about that.
You get the idea, because you comment it from, I like the Egyptians. I'm gonna be an Egyptian.
Yeah.
And this game they're called Jurwa. Okay, I'm there now.
Yeah.
So I think they do a very good job of it. Yeah, they overlay a fantasy setting on what I guess could be a little bit slightly sort of, what would you say?
Could be a bit confusing.
There might be some issues, I guess, around the sort of the politics of the area. If they were all proper Middle Eastern, you'd maybe be a bit silly about it. So I think it's good. I think they've got the bits that he wants to get out of each of the races.
Yeah.
And without them being overtly, the Romans, the Melkoni are.
Yeah. Well, the Greeks aren't the Melkoni. The Greeks.
I beg your pardon, sorry,
that's all right.
They're Greek enough, so you get it. But they're overlaid with enough differences and new stuff that actually you think, okay, well,
bit of a
I'm a Melkoni. I'm not from Thessalonica.
Yeah, but as you say, you've got enough to get you started. And if you want to read like Travellers on the War Road, which is basically almost all sort of background, I'll admit I haven't read it. But I started and I know you've got it, Dave.
Oh yeah,
it's all good,
reasonably well thumbed. But that maybe is like we're sort of saying, look, you haven't read it. I haven't felt the need to read it.
Yeah,
so,
but it's very pretty.
I think you can delve into the background as much as you want, or just sort of leave it.
I think there is a certain amount of that, and that's coming from somebody who's a committed gloranthophile. But because, as we discussed, the Jackals are outside of it, essentially you can, as a player, kind of ignore a lot of it. Coming from a different land, you're literally kind of strangers in a strange land, unless you are Luathi.
Yeah.
In which case, you can always say, well, you grew up kind of out. Your parents were Jackals, and you grew up outside of society or something. But there's always a valid in-game reason why you don't know stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas Inquest Gorantha obviously ties you very firmly to a society, to a clan, to a society. It can be.
I just wonder, in my experience of playing RuneQuest, you have to be grounded in your culture, so it's almost like you can't be an outsider. Well, generally the general play experience. Whereas in this, as you say, you by default you're an outsider. So although I think it's got that, there's quite a lot of complex stuff in there. If you want to be sort of true to the game,
although there is a lot of background there, it is far better for newbies than, say, Inquest Gorantha, where suddenly, as you say, you're expected to know about your clan and your grandmother and who your clan is at war with and why you hate the Lunars or hate this particular clan or hate trolls or something. You're kind of almost expected to kind of know that when you come into the game for your first session. Whereas here you can just wander up and,
get stuck in.
Hi, I've arrived from 1,000 miles away. I don't know what the hell's going on.
Because it's very much a game of a found family. You join a game, and you're not worrying too much about how your cultures interrelate. So you can be from very disparate cultures, and you'll have a little bit of niggle or clash, and you'll be a bit odd. But you're not actually worried about the fact that, well, in the past we were at war with each other, or technically I shouldn't be hanging out with you. So there's none of that complexity. and you can discover the game as a group. And I think I quite like the whole idea of you discover the world, unlike assuming you've got a background of knowledge. And it's quite a simple Bronze Age background. I mean, if you've played any game, you can pick this up pretty well. I think the gods are pretty well integrated as well, but they're not so overly a part of your life. It's not like Grantha where well, the virtues of my god are this, and this, so I should be like this. You're not running around looking for your holy days and all that kind of rubbish. So, yeah.
Although there is we'll talk a bit more. There's a pretty extensive calendar. So obviously calendars are important in this game somehow, although we haven't really touched on that. But
yeah. No, I absolutely agree. I think the other thing is the reason why I think it's very good is because it's fairly concise. You're not absolutely bombarded with 50 new character types. You're not bombarded with 8 different sort of paths to generate characters for each race.
Yeah.
There are 4 different types of people. You can be magic using or not.
Yep.
Ritual using,
Yeah.
But essentially you're all there for the same thing, which is to go and explore, discover, and adventure. I think it's a very simple, very, very well laid out path for getting started. The game is very simplistic without being in any way too simplistic, if you like. There's enough depth there for everybody to get involved. So I think it's set out well. It's very, very simplistic in terms of the way that it describes everything. So you're up and running very, very quickly.
Yeah, and I think as well, it's got that in common with Earth Dawn, is that there's a in-game or in-world reason why there are all these ruins everywhere. So that you've actually got a reason to go delving in dungeons. And whereas sometimes it's like, well, in sort of, let's say, more vanilla fantasy settings, you go, oh, there's a dungeon. Well, why is the dungeon there? I don't know. There just is. There's a monster in there. He built it. Whatever. Yeah. So the only thing that sort of thought,
and you've also all sort of got a common purpose.
Yeah.
The purpose is go and discover stuff. You may have sort of a background agendas specific to your character, but like you said, there is a reason for you all being there. There's a reason for you all being in this area. There's a reason for you all looking out for new, interesting rediscovery. It's good. I think it's really well laid out.
Okay, all right. So introduction, great, sets it up. This brings the world, or starts to bring the world to life, and then we go straight into sort of cultural overviews. And again, we've in chapter 2. So JM spends quite a bit of time talking about, as say, the 3 cultures we talked about, plus the Gerwa, who essentially are the sort of ancient Egyptian cultures. And each one has got their own cultural virtues, and that we'll come to that in a second, but that plays into your character creation, also mechanically has an impact on the game as well. And each has got 2 separate magical traditions. There are different rites for each culture, but they are different, and you do get that bit of flavour there. But again, it sets it up from it, so you can, even within if you've got a party full of Luathi, you could be very, very different characters within that as well, which is pretty good. So then straight into character creation. Okay, it's pretty straightforward. There is a useful summary in the appendices, which I'm very grateful for that it sort of lists that in there. It's based on OpenQuest, so just sort of going through in a little bit more detail. So first of all, you sort of choose your culture, and this is, again, right from the start, you choose a cultural virtue. Okay, and I think what's great, or what I really like about this, is that you've got a culture virtue, and once per session you can call on it. So if you've failed a roll, which, let's face it, in a percentile system is going to happen quite a lot, if it links with your cultural virtue, because I think Odysseus's cultural virtue was bear all things. I think that was a.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that meant. Well, you tell me what did that mean for Odysseus?
It basically meant he had very strong willpower. It was very hard. Once he was set on the course, it was very hard to steer him away from it. But it also meant that he wasn't kind of that prone to kind of being taken over by corrupt entities and that sort of thing.
And mechanically, what that meant, so if you failed a roll, you can turn it into success, or a success can be turned to a critical, depending, as long as you can, show how that virtue links to the roll. None of the cultural virtues are particularly linked to combat, so they're not. They're more of a out of combat role play type setup rather than power gamey type stuff, which I quite like that. So so right in there at the start, choosing your cultural virtues. Let's have a look. What else? the next step in after that is to be a ritualist, and ritualists are a little bit less effective, so they get fewer points to spend on things, and also they have to spend their, because it's a point buy for the skills.
Yep.
They have to purchase skill because their rights essentially are skills in their own rights are skills in their own right. Just going through it. Oh yeah, and then it's just attributes. I mean, my thinking is that the characters seem to start. They're pretty competent from the outset in this. I don't know
Yeah.
what you guys
Yeah.
think about that.
Yeah, I think they're pretty competent. I like the way ritualists are balanced, so that they are spend some of their points on devotion points. I have to, so I think they miss out on a couple of other
Yeah, they get
bonuses that the non-ritualists get as well.
yeah, they get fewer traits as well.
Fewer traits, that's it, yeah.
Do.
I think this is nicely balanced, and I always like a point buy system. Just I don't particularly like kind of swingy dice systems where one person's got an average score of like 5 and the other person got an average score of 15.
Okay, so attributes say it's point buy. You get 17 points to spread them out. I mean, it's very straightforward: strength, deftness, vitality, courage, wisdom, devotion, which is only important for ritualists, really. Because that's
no one else actually gets it.
Yeah, exactly. You don't get it. But interestingly, even if you sort of start off not as a ritualist, as you go on, you can spend advancement points. We'll come to that in a second. So active advancements.
It's a lot of advancements to become anywhere near as strong as a beginning ritualist, though.
Yeah. Although, to be fair, I mean, Shummer, so your character in the last sort of scenario, became and actually, I think probably pretty much saved the party with that one roll.
Yes.
Which is managed to, you had an ability that meant you could hold off the dead. So that to sort of stay outside a sort of a magic circle, which was pretty effective.
Yeah, that was very lucky. Because I said my percentage for it was only 35%, which is quite low. But I must admit, that's the nice thing with this, is that some of the stuff is quite powerful, but you don't get the highest roll to achieve it. So it is actually proving the point. It is difficult to do, particularly under stress, like when you've got a load of undead or a ghost immediately coming at your face. So I quite like that.
A little bit of pressure there, and then we come on to sort of what they call derived abilities, and I think this is sort of the first wrinkle, if you like, in the system. And it's about how characters take damage. All right. So what you do is you have 3 derived characteristics which sort of link together to sort of make your hit point pool, if you like. So you've got one called metal, you've got valor, okay, and then you've got say metal, then wounds. Okay, and you have 3 rows of wounds, and then you have your valor on top of it as well. So it's a bit to get your head around, but essentially what happens is, as Jackals travel from place to place, they start off with a certain amount of metal, METTLE, and they get tired. Basically, they get weary on the road. When you go into a combat situation, you look at, okay, so how many wound rows if you've got unfilled? Because let's say you've got 5 wounds, you get wound row 1, 2, and 3. You multiply the number of unfilled wound rows by the metal, and that generates your valor. Okay, and almost like valor are the hit points, your exhaustion, your ability to sort of get a bit knocked about, and those replenish in between combat rounds or between combats. But I think that's something that took me a bit of time to get my head round. What was it like for you guys coming into it?
I still don't think I fully understand it, but I just sort of let you guide me, Steve, because I do like, one thing I did like was the fact that you get your valor back. It doesn't become a war of attrition, really. If you're as long as your rolls go your way, it's not some mass war of attrition. So you're not potentially getting to the last fight and you're thinking, well, we're all screwed because we haven't got any hit points left.
Yeah.
So I thought that was quite nice. It balances, because it can be quite brutal.
Yeah,
drawing in individual combat, but the fact that you get back up to strength quite quickly, I think I appreciated that quite a lot.
I quite like the valor then the wounds part, purely because valor, it strikes me as as you say, the characters out the gate are pretty well rounded and can pretty much handle themselves quite nicely. There's no such thing as baby jackal. You are pretty much out there with a weapon and can hold your own, particularly if you're a part of a group, which obviously we are. And I think the wounds and the valor reflect that. You are a hardened, trained, seasoned warrior. You know, the first bit of combat where you get knocked about, your valor goes down. You can recover from that if you're a seasoned warrior with probably at least, just an hour's rest, or, they can probably get back up and start again. Hence, if you ever see reenactors, half an hour in the beer tent, they're straight up ready for another fight. Whereas then when you get the wounds, that is when things get serious. Because to be fair, you get quite a lot of valor. You do have a lot of valor to go through before your wound tracks start to fill up.
Yeah.
And your wounds are where it is like serious injuries. If you get hit into valor, it's normally somebody cutting you on the arm or giving you a bruise. A wound is actually somebody pretty much near down breaking your leg.
Yes.
So I quite like it. I think that in a way it's very much more of, and I know there's a lot of gamers out there who are going to hate this, but it's probably the most realistic way of damaging a character I have seen in a game.
Yeah, I really like it in as much as you say, valor comes back. Once you take wounds, and we'll touch on this a little bit when we talk about the combat system as well, but at the end of each combat, if you've taken a wound, then even if it's just one. Yeah, so basically, even if you take one wound at the end of combat, you have to roll for what they call scars. So if you've only taken one wound on the first row, it's unlikely there's going to be an issue. But if you get down to 0 wounds and you're out and you have to spend a fate point to avoid being killed, that can get messy, can't it? I think a Shummer can attest.
It can do. Shummer will never wear a bikini again with the wounds that she's got in her abdomen. And Uselake, Dave's character, now walks with a very dodgy limp, as I recall.
Yeah, and they could be quite nasty, those wounds, can't they? All those scars.
Yeah, there's no
Then, to be fair, the thing that took me down onto the ground, pretty much caved through me in like 3 turns. So, it was going to be horrendous.
But they're subject to the same issues that you are. So, characters can do really well in combat, or they could be utterly useless, like the 3 Stooges that you fought against in that one encounter, and they were falling over each other and poking each other in the eye, and you were just standing. Your character was standing there watching them as they just flailed around and then collapsed. So, disappointing, but there you go.
I like the system. It does require small amounts of recalculation, particularly if you kind of lose metal for things like the travelling rules.
Yeah.
And stuff, then it can, you can end up with a bit of kind of recalculation. But no, I like it. I think they're good.
Definitely.
You can lose metal surprisingly quickly in multiple encounters. If you find yourself fighting 2 or 3 people, you can, and you don't have the clash points to clash against them. You can quite easily go down quite quickly.
And I think this is the thing: metal, wounds, valor. I think it's those 3 different things all operate, and I think it could get. It's quite easy. I think, as you'll found, Martin. If you come into it fresh, it takes a bit of time to get your head around it. So I think this game does repay sort of repeated play, because you get used to how that thing works, and there are lots of things that can alter. We'll come to clash points in a bit, because that's a whole different thing. But anyway, okay, all right. So skills, there are 23 skills in this. So well done on not having 50 million skills. Okay, and they're all useful. So it's based on open quest, so it's pretty straightforward. Interesting, it's got what they call an ancient lore skill in there, so it's a bit like Cthulhu Mythos in as much as you can't. Some characters get it at the start, or a small number of points. But the sort of the conceit is that there's sort of in the past of the Zaharets, the War Road, there were these lots of cultures that existed, and there's you're sort of in the ruins of what came before. And so ancient lore, you pick it up as you go along, little bits here and there. But I don't think anyone has got above 20%. I think someone. No, so you don't get an awful lot of it, and it's not game breaking, but it's just nice to have that, so you get a bit of an extra insight if you make the roll as you go along. And then they talk about traits, so you get to select a set of traits. So there are generic traits, there are cultural traits as well, and also some that are specific to different ritualists. And what a trait is, it's like an advantage mechanic. So what you're doing is you're rolling your percentile dice. If you've got a positive trait, then you roll an extra unit, an extra 1s dice. And that's important, because in this game, if you roll a double and you're successful, that's a critical. If you roll a double and you fail, that's a fumble. But if you've got a positive trait, then you can choose which of the ones you're going to use. So if you roll 22 and you failed, let's say, and you roll an extra dice, it's a 3. You can say, it's a 23, not a 22. Again, in play, it's very, very quick. But also you can have negative traits, which Ocker has got, hasn't he?
Yeah. Ambushes and social interactions.
Yeah. Yeah. So which
No, really?
avoiding ambushes is quite useful, and Okka's not very good at it. So, or he's less good than others. Put it that way.
Oh, he doesn't mind it because remember he's a glory seeker.
He
That's
is.
one of his things,
Yeah.
and he likes the idea of being ambushed and defeating people.
Yeah. Got a mark for death, and then had the
Yeah.
option of getting rid of it, but decided to keep it because he thought that meant the enemies would come to him. And it would make life a lot easier to help him write his glory song.
To that point, as I recall asking for a friend, but if I was to accidentally put Akalana resin on him while he was asleep, would that cause corruption or just like a minor HR moment?
Kalana resin is this thing that it's the only thing that cures wounds, really. I mean, there's some spells that do it as well, and wounds are quite hard to get rid of or to sort of regenerate unless you've got this Akalana resin. So I'm very generous as a GM, so you tend to have quite a lot of it. So, or am I? I don't know. Generous, maybe. And the last step in character creation is armor. So it's fairly generic in terms of weapons and armor. Again, it's from open quest. Thoughts on the character creation process?
I thought it was quite smooth as well. One thing I do like is there is actually step 7, which is the character questions, where you answer a list of questions and the GM can, or the lore master, as you're called in this system, can give you active and passive advancements based on this.
Yeah.
Which I quite like because it lets people think about, what a bit more than I want my character to kill things. So I love that.
See, that was Okka's problem. He joined late. I didn't get to ask my questions. I could have had more skills.
Didn't you answer your questions? Well, in that case, Okka, when we restart, you'll have to answer your questions. How's that?
Yeah.
You get your passive advances.
That's got to be done in front of everybody because it's going to be hilarious.
Of course.
I like the way the derived stats basically all based off kind of 2 stats. So just increasing one stat doesn't always work, and it rounds down as well. So
yeah.
I think that's quite good.
Yeah, and just coming back to the whole traits thing, I like because whereas the virtues tend to be sort of non-combat oriented, the traits they can be combat oriented, and it's not game breaking, but it's just a nice. Actually, have I been able to can I get edge a critical out of this, for example?
I think the only thing I do think that is a bit complicated in this particular system is that it sort of cobbles together numbers of different bits. So you've got open quest, you've got elements of rune quest, you've got elements of BRP, but you've also got other elements of other kind of fantasy overlaid games. And I think trying to sort of bring together 3 or 4 different subsystems into what is essentially basic role playing, fuses things a little bit, but only in as much as a GM. I don't know whether you found this, but as a GM, you kind of get a little bit confused by, well, have we got luck in this? Or, do I do a hit table?
But that's not specific to this game, though, is it? I think if you were playing any BRP or BRP adjacent game, you'd have the same thing or a similar thing, wouldn't you? Because after when you get to our age, Dave, you got so many things crammed into your head, and especially if you're running lots of different systems, it's easy to get confused. I do it all the time between the games I'm running. But
all your luck. What? There's no luck in this.
Roll athletics. There is no athletic. Oh Jesus, you know what I mean. Find the skill that's a bit like that, and we'll roll that. Yeah, no, I get it.
Critical? No, I don't think it is. Hang on.
But it's actually much easier than RuneQuest, I think. This game, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
slicker.
Yeah. So you got your characters. We've got the background. Chapter 1. We sort of a bit of the world. We've got we've sort of learned some of these unusual words, which make my brain melt sometimes. But it's all about the background. Created the character, which is good. And you've got a reason for adventuring, and then we hit the actual system itself, so the class system. I really like the class system. I think it works really, really well. I think, we'll touch on some of the sort of complexities of it. But yeah, so I say basically it's open quest percentile system, a little bit of variation, different modifiers for it. So, difficult rolls, easy rolls, whatever it might be. It's very clear about who succeeds if there are opposed rolls. So if you roll higher and you're successful, doesn't matter if the other person's successful, the one who rolls higher is the winner, is success in that. Which I don't think RuneQuest makes that clear. I don't think, although pretty much that's how I've always played it, but it doesn't actually make that clear. It's got rules for helping others as well. So if you've got doing a survival skill roll and other people can work together, it's not it's not massive. I mean, basically, those helping can add 10% of their skill to whoever's making the main roll. So
yeah, but we had several occasions where the person making the roll only succeeded because they had like an extra 3% off the rest of us.
Yeah.
So it does, and I don't know why, perhaps because it is such a small percentage, when it works, it really is a moment at the table.
I think any percentile system that gives something is always welcome, isn't it? Because guaranteed, you and in this game as well, if you roll above 90 or any roll of 90 and above is a failure. So it doesn't matter how good you are. Basically, if you roll above 90, then you've failed. That's it. Okay. So, but there's a bonus. There's a reason to get up above 100%, and we'll come to that in a little bit later on, because I know Odysseus has got some skills in that one. So criticals and fumbles, as I've talked about that one as well. Fate points, okay, absolutely critical. So at the start of every session, every character gets a fate point back. You can have no more than 3 at any one time. They get used all the time, you guys, don't you? You're cycling through your fate points all the time. I mean, there's a really useful one to hold one back, because if you get down to 0 wounds, you spend a fate point, you don't die. But if you haven't got a fate point to that, then I'm afraid that's the end. And we haven't lost a character yet, which is quite good. We've got close on several occasions. This is a game that I think replays a bit of tactics. I think charging into hordes of foes, especially if they're, the rapuma, or what they call the zombies, is not a great idea, because you'll just get chewed up by attrition, basically. What do you guys think about combat generally? What's your thoughts about that?
I like it. It's the most realistic I've seen. It's deadly. I mean, I know that there are certain points where I think Steve, you were thinking that maybe you hadn't quite balanced it. It looked like we were going through too easily.
Yeah.
But the moment we started failing, or they, if we both won, they were rolling higher than us, so they won. The amount of damage being done could very quickly just change it on dice roll, literally. So you never, even though we went in on a couple of combats thinking, oh, well, there's only 2 tech and we can take them. Oh, hell no, it was really, really hard battle. So I think it's actually done extremely well, that you can kind of hedge it a bit, but you can't go in there thinking, this is going to be a cakewalk, because it really isn't. Yeah. And I quite like that.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, no, I really like the combat system. I particularly like the clash system. I think that's really good. And the ability to spend clash points to achieve combat effects like extra damage or damaging a nearby opponent, or that sort of thing, I think is really it's really a kind of fun way of doing.
It's probably worth just going through the sort of the flow of combat, actually, just so we get an overview. So we've talked a little bit about valor points already. So at the start of your combat, you set your valor points, multiply your metal by the number of unfilled wound rows you've got. Then you check for ambushes, okay? And I quite like the ambush rule in this. Ocker probably doesn't so much, but basically you roll a sort of awareness versus stealth, or there's an opposed roll off, and for the number, depending on how many of the party fail, okay, the opponents get 1 action free. So it's not game breaking, but I think when you got ambushed by some wolves, so sort of bandits, you got hammered in the first. I think you got criticaled in the first round because you can't respond to it, because you don't. So because all of your actions really are powered by what we call clash points, which we'll come to in a second. And I think, again, not game breaking, but it makes a difference. Next step then is initiative, and again, initiative's quite interesting. So it's a d6 plus your deftness, so your speed really, and each group of adversaries rolls. So a group of Takan, like beastmen or whatever it might be, they'll roll, and then each individual character rolls as well. And then its highest goes first, but it doesn't have to. So, for example, Shummer rolls the highest, and then it's Odysseus, and it's Ocker, let's say. On the highest initiative point, anyone in that party, in that side, can choose to go. So you can, although Shummer might have rolled the highest, it could be that Odysseus, it's more important for him to go first. And so it cycles through in this way. And again, likewise with the opponents.
I really like the ability, because you want someone to go first to get out of combat or something, or or you need someone else to go first to take out an injured opponent. So I think it's a really good mechanic.
What I like also is if there's a draw, then the adversaries go first. Because in so many games, it's actually, if it's a draw, goodies go first. Or actually, I like it, the fact that the baddies get to go first in that situation. So
No, I really like the way the combat flows, and I like the initiative thing is good because actually you can start to play a bit more tactically if you want. It's not just purely on a dice roll. You could hold somebody back who's going to got magic or who can actually rescue the situation. So it gives you that option.
Yeah.
It's not completely swingy because it's based on your definite. So
and it's only a D6 plus your deafness, isn't it?
D6, yeah. So you've always got the character who's a bit slow, Ocker, but
Odysseus is pretty slow as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, but all the enemies to be killed by Odysseus, don't they?
Yeah.
And despite what you were talking about the ambush and things, one of the things I do like about combat, Steve, is it feels like it'd be very hard to be one shot.
Yes.
It feels very hard that you can't. It's not like a rune quest where somebody gets a critical done to the head. That's it, character down or NPC down. You're not going to pick things out in one go. Which obviously, if you're fighting a big monster, you might want that 1 in 100 chance. But this gives you, as a character, it gives you that and the fate point to pull yourself back from death. If you do get one shot, you're going to turn around and say, actually, I'm not dead.
It gives you the D&D large number of hit points, but they're not really hit points. As you say, they're kind of fatigue. So it kind of it's much more kind of sensible. And then when you kind of get into wounds, that's when you kind of get the rune questing of, oh God, someone's chopped my leg off. When you kind of roll for the scars, it's so it has the combination of the kind of rune questy kind of I've lost a limb, and it also has the kind of D&D of I've got 50 hit points.
So are we saying it's the good bits of RuneQuest in terms of the combat style? Is that what we're saying? Or would you not go that far, Andrew? I mean, I prefer it to combat system.
I'm not sure I'd go entirely that far, but actually, as a combat system, I really, really like it. I mean, the clash points and the wounds and and as I said, I think it's a good combination of lots of different systems.
Yeah.
I think
also, I'm sure that there are other systems out there. I mean, it'd be good to know what the influences were on the system. But as you say, I think it's quite, because action points, there are lots of games that use action points, like Mithras, for example. I understand using action points, but in here it's pretty quick, and also your action points can change between rounds. So I say, in terms of just going back through the flow of combat, so the initiative we've talked about. Morale, okay, so this is where NPCs run away from combat, and it's pretty likely that some of them will run away, so they make willpower checks just basically to see if they stay or go. And then you go into combat rounds, and what you do at the start of each combat round, you generate your clash points. So you'll have certain clash points which are based off your stats, but also depending on weapon options as well. Or even sort of certain items can increase your clash points. And clash points are a pool of points that you use. You always get to be able to move, okay? You can do your move, and you get to make an attack, okay? If you're successful, you can spend some of those clash points to do more damage, or you can use some of the clash points on your turn to change an item in your pack. You can do like scything blows, all that sort of stuff. And so really it's the clash point economy and you have to keep you don't have to, but you'd be, I think, foolish not to keep clash points back, because the way it works is if an enemy is attacking you or you're attacking an enemy and there's no clash points on their side or on your side, it's just a straight roll to hit and you can't oppose it. Whereas if you're able to clash with the opponent, they roll to hit, you roll to hit, whoever does best succeeds, successful but rolls highest, they're the one that actually does the damage. But you can do criticals to each other, and actually you can end up basically killing each other in combat potentially, because it all is resolved. So it's pretty lethal, but keeping those clash points. But I can also send in, I think you were doing it with your hirelings last time. You were sending them in first to use up the opponent's clash points, and then you guys are coming in afterwards in a very cold-blooded but very sensible way.
That was definitely Shimmer's thing of not dying. I will say I like the way that with the clash points and the way that combat moves of if you get attacked, you can attack back if you've got clash points, because it means you get a lot more bites at the cherry, as it were, to get rid of a foe. But one thing it does do is it does make initiative quite difficult, because there was a couple of times, and it's an innocent mistake. Oh, we're at the top of the round. Hang on, I ain't gone yet. But you can. I was clashing. And I think that does mean, I do think that the initiative, you have to be really quite strict with it. And I know you are, Steve, but occasionally, it does happen.
Yeah.
It is very confusing, because it gets to a point of, whose go was that? Because you can both hit it.
We'll touch on this when we get to the way that adversaries are set up for combat, because they use like what they call a combat range. So it's a bit like, you roll for the type of attack you do in Year Zero games. But you can have some creatures that might do chain three attacks together, and then so you clash the first one, and then they attack back, and then you clash and you damage back to them, and then you go roll who attack. So it can get a bit complicated, and I think it's probably easier on Foundry maybe because you can track all that stuff because the way I've got it set up. But it is a challenge, and I think it's easy to get a bit lost. I'm not sure what you could. I mean, you could obviously take that out as an option, so you can't do multiple attacks. But I think there's nothing more satisfying.
No, I think it's great actually, because finding out the opponent rolled 34, so that means they attack with like 2 claws and a bite or something.
Yeah.
That's quite interesting. I mean, I know there's been some fights where the opponent has attacked 3 times, lost 3 times, and basically died before on their own first attack, which is quite funny.
Yeah. Basically, that's it. So you set your clash points at the start of the round, you regenerate your clash points, you do your attacks, whatever, keeps them back hopefully for when the inevitable counterattack comes, and it just goes round and round basically till the combat finishes, and then you have your aftermath, which we referred to, which is the scars piece. And that's after every combat. So if you've taken a wound and it's not healed, I mean, I'm quite generous in as much as I say, well, if you've got any Acalana resin, you apply that first, and then if actually, you still got wounds, then you sort of, potential roll for scars. Not likely, but you might roll really badly, So yeah, I think we're pretty happy with combat, aren't we? Overall, I think we've got the.
Yeah.
I think it's not very, very quick. It's not against the Dark Master long. Okay, it's in the middle. But I think it's well worth the effort in terms of doing it. So it doesn't ever feels onerous, I don't think, to play.
On a personal note, when we played our Long RuneQuest campaign, we switched to OpenQuest, and I really didn't enjoy OpenQuest kind of instead of RuneQuest. But here it really works. Okay. I really like it. I really like it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I prefer it. I mean, OpenQuest is obviously the basis of it, but I think the iteration and the way it's been refined,
the clash points, the back and forth, the
absolutely
initiative, I think is it all works together to create really great combats.
The only thing I will say, because it is sort of medium crunch or medium to high crunch on this one, I think it's easy to forget things. So when I was looking through the rules before, there's one thing we have never used, which is taunt. Okay, so which is basically you make an enemy attack you, and that's something you can do. I think Odysseus does that quite a lot because he's a bit of a bulwark. I said bulwark in as much as he's got shields and armor and that.
He's got shield, exactly.
Yeah. So, and again, there's a few rules which are sort of missing, I think it's fair to say. So things like there's no cover rules for ranged combat, and there's no mounted combat rules. Although you can get chariots and stuff in there, and in fact, I think probably later on in the Fall of the Children of Bronze campaign, I think you get to ride around in chariots. But it's fairly easy. If you've got access to OpenQuest, you can pull those things in. Or you can pull them from any percentile system, really.
But you say there's no cover, but you can use a clash point to dodge a ranged attack.
You can.
Which you can't really do in RuneQuest, certainly unless it's a thrown spear. I mean, you can't dodge arrows and things like that. So it gives you that nice thing that you can actually be heroic. Yeah. I also think it really does penalise you if you go 2 against 1, which is very realistic, which is nice, because sometimes some games you just think, now, this is ridiculous. You're fighting 3 people. I don't really care how good you are. You're probably going to die.
Yeah.
And this would give you that because you're going to run out of clash points.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the one bit of the game where it's a real departure from sort of OpenQuest or BRP, isn't it, really?
Yeah, completely. I agree.
This idea of the clash points and everything else. I can kind of see why he did it, because it does it's that sort of conservation of action, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've only got a certain number of things that you can do to react within a combat. So you have one, again, a bit like this sort of campaign paper. You have one eye on, okay, what could happen?
Yes.
Which is good because it makes you think about it, I think. I think it makes you think about the combat more. So, for example, I think when Andrew was incredibly focused on how many clash points he had with his character.
Yeah.
So he really, I think, because he was also the most effective, I think, in combat, wasn't he?
Yeah,
really?
he's a combat monster.
He really thought about it. and it's not, and he's not in any way a min maxer.
No.
It's a combat system that really, I think, probably one of the few I've come across where you really do start to consider, okay, what are my options, and making the best choice in those options. So I quite like it. It does mean it's a bit complicated, and I think for the GM, I think the workload in a combat is significant for the GM. So I mean, I think you did very well, and never made it look like it was sort of slow or complicated or really lengthy. But if you've got lots and lots of creatures,
yes,
there's a lot of bookwork, isn't there?
And that's where Foundry works. Yeah, it works quite well, because obviously we use the little clocks down the side of the screen. I get a lot of stick for using clocks, but in this instance, to track clash points,
they work like clockwork.
It worked like there you go. There's a saying there, isn't there? But yeah, so I don't find it particularly difficult, because okay, if you've got horde creatures like the Norican, or loads of the sort of what they call the undead dudes, Rapuma, the zombies. Yeah, they only get a certain number. They have very few clash points. So yes, you've got like lots of them. They're going to roll lots of attacks, but you don't have a lot of options with them. But I think clash points, if you're up against one big creature, then clash points is good. You needs clash points, but it's easy to get overwhelmed. And I think your character found that, ran into a whole bunch of zombies and got absolutely lamped, which was
yeah. Again, I would point at my fellow players and say they rather left me to it. However, but I think, although it certainly takes a little bit of getting used to, excuse me, it also wards practice.
Yes.
So I think that's, again,
system mastery and knowing the rules really
encourages
helps.
you to play the game more, yeah, which is good. Once you get used to it, I think it's really, really good. I could see how it might put some people off.
Oh, yeah.
I think some people might look at it and go, oh, God, that's a bit... I'm really going to do all of this? And actually, in practice, I think it works quite well.
I think when you've got...
benefits from...
Yeah, it's got a more complex action economy. So if you think about something like AD&D, or Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, whatever, that's got a relatively simple action economy. Something like Savage Worlds, relatively simple, you got up to 3 actions. In this, depending on how you outfit your character and the sort of traits you take and all the other bits and pieces, you can end up with quite a lot of clash points, and that gives you more options. So you're right. I think it's a very flexible system. It does reward system mastery. I think you need to get your head around it, and there's things that aren't clear in the rules, and we had to house rule it. I'm not going to go into that, but things like we got multiple back and forth actions. But I think again, Foundry really helped, because you could mark a lot of it on the screen as you were going along. So I
think the other thing that's quite interesting actually is that it wards looking at the defensive aspects of combat. And I don't think that that's something that many games do. Okay, well, you can dodge or you can maybe parry. But I think actually with this, with that thinking about, okay, well, how could I turn defense into attack? How could I undertake different options and different skills in order to become better at using, multiple parries or fighting multiple opponents?
Yeah.
So I think it's, I think it's a fantastic little system.
Yeah.
And you can get as much out of it as being, the one who likes to thump things, as you could at being, I'm going to be the one who is very light on their feet, very defensively minded, and then I'll dart in and strike when the time presents itself.
Absolutely.
Or the opportunity presents itself. So I think it's good. It makes you look at the whole of combat, not just roll to hit.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, so combat, great, flavourful, and it also brings in things like you can use your rituals or your rites in combat as well, which is obviously what Shummer did. It's a cost to it. I think some of the numbers are a bit off. So, for example, standing up from prone can cost 3 clash points, a bit high, and also we'll come to light and darkness later. That can be really, I mean, I suppose fighting in darkness is pretty hard, and I think I've been overly generous in that. So for example, when you guys are in
No, Steve, not
when you're fighting in darkness,
No.
or even when you're clashing, so when someone's trying to hit you and you're having to spend points to respond, according to the letter of the rules, you're supposed to spend more clash points. So you guys get caught in darkness by Takan, who basically aren't affected by darkness. You should be mullered. So when we play, I think when we go back to playing it again, I will be a bit more strict about the light rules. So
Oh, come on, you doubled up the clash points. You're in half darkness. No, you can see fine with one torch, Steve. What are you talking about? It's right up close to my nose. I can see it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing with it is there's a certain one thing I think you are pretty generous on is, you let us kind of have torches, even though we've kind of got, a spear in one hand and a shield in the other, and it's like, where the hell are you actually going to stick the torch?
well, I thought it's stuck on the back of his shield on a little.
Basically, yeah, exactly. He's going to have some sort of bracket or something on his shield, but it's kind of it's kind of one of those things. How are you carrying 2 scimitars and a torch? So it's but you have to have that, because otherwise, as you say, it would just be impossible. It's
When we come back to playing this, if we get penalised now, it's your fault.
No, but we'll help us now. We've got our lantern bearers.
Yeah.
Well, we've got one currently.
To be fair, they were happiest when they were holding the torch.
Standing at the back holding the torches, absolutely.
Yeah.
They weren't getting killed for a start.
Yeah, oh dear, they didn't do well. But at least there's more treasure for you guys to go around now. Assuming you survive the current encounter, which we pause the game on. Cool. Okay. All right. So combat, we like it. I think there's, again, some of the clash points could bear with a little bit of tweaking, probably, because I think, especially with the light and darkness, it sort of starts to verge on being simulationist. I think at that point. I mean, you want a downside to being in darkness, but it is pretty onerous. And we'll sort of touch on that in a bit. Okay. So chapter 5. So we're pretty much halfway through the book. Actually, it's pretty good. Okay. There's still a lot of stuff to go to. So rites. So again, we've talked about different traditions. There's 2 for each of the cultures. Each rite is a skill by itself. So again, we'll talk a little bit about advancement shortly, but basically if you're successful, you get to roll to, like you do in RuneQuest, you roll at the end to see if it increases. There's a reasonable number in the book, and there's a few more in the Travellers on the War Road supplement. So it's only Shummer who's just become, so your character Kat, who's become a Kahar of Alwayn, so a priest of Alwayn. And obviously we've got Odysseus, who's a priest.
Odysseus is
a war priest of Riley. Yeah. So I don't know, any thoughts about the rights? I mean, I think they seem pretty good to me, but you guys will use them.
I mean, I really like them. I mean, I chose Riley because she's definitely kind of a combat guy. My rights are very kind of combat based and things in terms of doing extra damage and having extra chances to hit and things. So I think, if you want to kind of do a warrior kind of priest, then I think that's a really good one. I had a read of the Hekar ritualists, the Goa ones. Might be me, but I found those quite complex. I couldn't quite work out a lot of those seem to be sort of summoning and
that's almost like alchemical type.
The Goa stuff, and I couldn't quite work out how they would work in game. Compared to
I don't know because,
rituals.
as you know, with all these games, I only learn by playing them or running them.
Well, yeah, exactly. I think that's they probably play better than they read. There's,
I think the Goa ones are very much based on the fact that the Goa are basically Egyptians.
Yes,
that's absolutely honest. And quite frankly, the first one that they've got of turning incorporate spirits into dragging them into the mortal realm for the duration. Oh, I'd have loved that, quite frankly. But they're all based on sort of like pseudo-Egyptian type ideas, particularly to do with the undead and the mortal and the spirit realm by the looks of it, which it fits the Goa.
Yeah, and I think that the rituals are definitely. I mean, like the Ryla rituals. They're definitely kind of. You can imagine the kind of classical Greek bit of. Being inspired by, where Apollo comes down and takes you over and makes you a better warrior and things, and I think, so I definitely think the rituals are inspired by the cultures, definitely. And I think they work quite well, so.
Yeah. And there's no sort of like magic bolt in there. I mean, there's some useful, powerful
there's no fireball equivalent.
Yeah,
I mean, they're very much kind of
and they do link, as you say, to the cultures. I don't know much about the Trouge rituals.
I haven't looked, and I was just looking through them now. I'm not sure it's as useful as you'd expect them to be for a Trouge. They're not quite as violent as I would hope. Oh, I do have some great names.
Yeah,
Allow slaughters the eastern beasts. That seems quite cool. So yeah, there's a few. They do have good names.
Yeah.
But I'll be interested to see how they go in play. There's a few which are really aimed at the Tekken, which basically means you can do a lot of damage to Tekken, or you can take on lots of them. But if there's a non-Tekken in the foes, you've got a problem.
Yeah,
because they can hit you easily.
I think the only thing I would say might need a little bit of attention is the magic system.
Okay.
If you don't want it to be all about, okay, fireball or, magic missile.
Yeah.
And going through some of the ritual type stuff, I think is a little bit, maybe that's not quite in keeping with the game, but I might be a bit wrong. I've not really played or.
Yeah. I don't think there are a lot of. I mean, I think the magic or the rituals are pretty flavourful in terms of the culture. Yeah. So, for example, the Malconi ones tend to be about calling on the gods for their strength or whatever, whereas the Gerwa ones are around. So you've got the like alchemist types. I think, and there's not many sort of out and out combat spells, but there's some really useful ones. So, like Kat, when Shummer bought that ritual to hold away the undead or the corrupted, and it came in really useful. That's what stopped the party getting absolutely mullered by that spirit. But I mean, my thing is actually there's room for more rituals, more and because they are skills like anything else, you can increase them, and they're actually relatively, within the constraints of the game world, they're relatively easy to get them. It would be good to have someone who's just an out and out ritualist, just to sort of and really invest in that, because I think that would be interesting to see how that works. We haven't got one of those, have we?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely. So we didn't, as a group of people, we didn't start with anyone having many of the rituals or the magic system.
So Andrew's character, Odysseus, is a ritualist, but he's got a couple of rituals. He doesn't use them very often. He uses them at the but he's mainly a combat. He's a fighter, basically, and he's a warrior priest of Ryla, so the sort of the warrior god of the Melkoni, the Greeks, whatever. But it would be interesting to see, what are just let's just totally focus on a ritualist and just see what they were like. I think
which I think then makes the setup of the party quite important. I think if you want to explore all the aspects of the game, I think you've got to have an out and out ritualist in there. Plus, you need a couple of people who've got a little bit of access to some sort of magic and stuff.
Yeah,
so, it is good fun. It's the only area of the game I think I'm probably not quite convinced about.
Yeah, no, I get you, and I think in Travelers on the War Road they've put a couple more rituals in, I think, for each ritual path. So rites, we think, good, they're great, they're flavourful, not game breaking, they're useful. I mean, the right at the right time is absolutely critical, which we touched on. But again, Jackals have got access to these, and you can pick them up later on, even if you don't start off, even though, as you say, you're not going to be quite as powerful picking up later. Then we get on to advancement. Okay, so as I said, characters, they start off pretty competent in this anyway. They've got, you can get traits which help you. You can obviously got your virtues, which are more like sort of out of combat things as well. There are two types of advancement. There are your passive advancement. So those are ones where you roll at the end of each scenario or each session. You roll your percentile dice. If you fail, so if you roll higher than your current skill, depending on what your skill level is, you get a certain amount of points to increase. So the higher you are in terms of skill, the harder it is, as it is in all these games. But you also get active advancements as well, which is you get like an award at the end of each scenario, typically 3. I think that's what it seems to work out as. And you can spend those on extra skills, you can spend them on extra rituals, whatever. But it means that you can become competent. You start competent, you can get better as well. And you've got a little bit of control over that, which I quite like. Just one thing for me before I pass over to you guys. There's a purpose. So say you fail if you get above 90. So 90 and above, it's a failed skill roll, depending on what your skill is. If you get to 100, then you start to develop what they call skill talents, okay, which are nice little things, so additional traits, or you get more clash points. But there are skill talents not just for martial skills, but for trade, for crafting, for all sorts of stuff. And so there is a value in just keep pumping your points into things, even if it's, you're starting to get up towards that, over that 90 level.
It's very generous. The idea of you get an advancement at the end of a session on that, I think that's pretty good. And even if you are over 100, as you said, you're always going to fail. You've always got a 10% chance.
Of course. Yeah.
Which is really nice. The actual advancements, but I think that's quite a nice way of finishing an adventure. What I would say about the talents, I was looking at them. I think you could have more, and you could have some which was specific to the culture you're part of. I think that would allow you to tweak your character and add even more difference and make your character more unique. Or maybe it's just a case of having a discussion with a friendly GM and saying,
"Do you know any friendly
GMs?
about
this?" No. But you know what I mean? So you could say, actually, and you might say, that's cool. So the rule of cool might actually come into play here.
I mean, I must admit, in terms of the over 100% things, I quite like the fact that you have ones that are specific to the skill, but you also have some general ones. I think there was one I looked at that enabled you to trade 1 fate point for 2 clash points.
Okay.
At any point, which I thought was potentially quite a useful one. So
I think anything that gives you extra clash points is absolutely brilliant, isn't it? Basically,
I like, and going on to that, I like the fact that some, masterwork pieces of equipment or magic items can give you extra clash points, which I thought, it's really nice. It's better than the standard, like, it's a +1 spear. It's
it's not guaranteed use, is it? It means you actually have to do something to make use of the clash points. So
and you've got to be wielding that specific item as well. Which is.
Yeah, I think the other bit of that is it works better as campaign play.
Oh, absolutely.
Maybe it does one-offs, yeah. So I think what you end up doing is you end up investing more in the character that you want to be.
Yeah.
Maybe than you do in sort of putting the character together in the first place. I don't know whether that makes any sense.
No, it does. It does. Yeah.
You get this character, you put it all together, and then you think, okay, well, but what's next for this character? So there's always one eye on the future, which I think it really does make campaign play a lot more of a focus of the game than maybe the one-offs which I was doing. So
and I think things like, the Fall of the Children of Bronze, which is the sort of the grand campaign that we're sort of halfway through at the moment, that really rewards that. And I think things when we touched in the podcast talking about retirement as well, so retiring your character. So the idea is that you should retire your characters when they get messed up, by whichever horrible beast they come up against. You can retire them, but you still get credit for the fact you've adventured or whatever.
So, is that bit of Pendragon, isn't it?
Yeah. I've never played Pendragon. I mean, it's one of the things I've never played. Well, that's not true. Sam would beat the crap out of me. I've played the Pendragon system, which Sam has run, or Sam's version of it, but I've never played Pendragon properly. But it's like in the One Ring. I mean, a lot of the systems have these seasonal actions, downtime stuff, don't they? It's it works quite well.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna be playing actually this weekend. We're playing Tales of the Old West.
Oh, cool!
The guys from the Effect podcast have put together. And that has a very, very big element of not only you develop your settlement, you develop your characters in conjunction with the development of the settlement and everything. It's absolutely brilliant, really, really good system.
Yeah.
So I think there's the really strong elements of Jackals is, as I was saying, I think it does favour campaign play, and it's interesting enough for you to invest time in it. I think.
Yeah.
The fact that there's not a terrific amount of stuff around from other than the 3 books, I think is a little bit of a hamper. But I'd definitely consider at the time sitting down and writing a really good campaign for it. I think it's brilliant.
I mean, I will say that as expected, there's sort of a reasonable amount of errata for this book and the other sort of books in the series. Not ridiculously so, but I think there's quite a lot of things that sort of around rites, around rituals, certainly around things like we talked about metal. Actually, we didn't touch on the travel rules, did we? I forgot to touch on those. We're going to go back and add that in now. Let's talk about the travel rules. I think, this book, great. I think, you have to I think it's something that probably do with a revision like they always do. I mean, I don't know whether Osprey were going to do a sort of a revised version. I suspect not, because they don't seem to come back to their games once they've done it, do they? But yeah, as I say, I think but overall, it's all the rules we've talked about are, because this is the end of the rule section, pretty playable.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just go back and talk about travel, because that is so. I mean, you guys are Jackals. You're out going for, journeying up and down the war road, looking for adventure, and so inevitably there's a bit of wandering around. I mean, the rules themselves are pretty straightforward. So every couple of days of travel, you make a survival roll. It depends on, if you pass or fail. Obviously, you pass, happy days. If you fail, you might lose a little bit of metal. So basically, you get more tired. If you're traveling through, some parts of the world have been sort of corrupted by the beast creatures or whatever, or the forces of chaos. And if you travel through those, then you can also not only lose more metal, but also you can gain corruption points as well. And corruption can build up over time in your characters. You guys seem to be pretty terrified of corruption, by the way. Any corruption comes your way, you spend the next however many times atoning to get rid of it all, which is not fun. I like corruption in my characters. Yeah, anyway.
Well,
No,
you need to ban your corruption out better, Steve.
I should do, shouldn't I? I should. And that's a lesson for me for future, I think. Kat, you're right. So be more corrupting. I think there's a little bit of a little gap here, because you can have mounts. And so all I said was you guys got a positive trait when you had a mount and you were riding around. But if you lost metal, then essentially your mounts could basically die on the road. If you fail survival rolls, not only do you lose metal, there's also, depending on how many people fail, then there's a chance of having an encounter. So if you've got a party of 4 and 2 of them fail, fumbles count for more, but you've got a 1 or a 2 chance on a D10 of an encounter, which is it's entirely in the book. It's entirely combat. So what do you guys think about the travel? Onerous? Okay. What do you think about it in relation to, what's the play experience in relation to like the One Ring, let's say? Do you improve?
Okay.
Do you like it better? Is it? I know the One Ring has got. I'm thinking about the mechanics now rather than the sort of the setting.
Yeah. I think it's a little bit unfair to compare it with the One Ring, because I think that one of the we talked about this on the One Ring podcast, didn't we? The big thing about Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, most of it involves travel.
Yeah.
There's got to be a fundamental part of the game. With this, about discovery, it's about a bit more about investigation, a little bit more about, as you're saying before, the action economy as well. So travel, I think, can be seen as being a little bit of an interruption to the action. However, I think it manages it quite well. I think there's opportunity to do stuff, so the sort of essentially the random encounter stuff, which rather impacts on your most recent pod of the game master, toolkit.
Yeah.
I think again, I'm not pumping sunshine, but I think you do handle bits between action really well as a GM.
Get through it.
Actually, you make the travel and you make the adventuring to a site. I think you make it a real part of the game. It's not okay. Well, you travel through the night,
and
everything's
then
okay,
you get there. Yeah. Because the main thing.
Go on.
I was going to say, because the main thing about travel is, and there's similar to the One Ring. It's like, what condition do you reach the other end in? So if you're having fights as you go along, or if you're having, it doesn't have to be fights. It often is, because I've actually created sort of non-combat encounter tables, because all the tables in the book are combat, aren't they? It's basically you have a fight, but it's supposed to be a dangerous world. And that's the whole point. But it's, if you lose metal, METTLE, all right, that is 1 point of metal loss is a massive impact, isn't it? Because that's your multiplier for wounds and everything else, and your valor.
Yeah.
So people get really worried about, if we're traveling into the wilderness and then we're losing, so the horse gets tired, the horse dies. Oh, I'm losing metal now. I've got less to call on if we get into a fight. And I think that's the benefit. Yes, explore the world, have encounters, meet monsters and run away from them, whatever. But it's really okay. Then you get to the adventure site. Right, what condition are you in? Are you fit enough to be able to do what you need to do when you get there? So it is quite a dangerous, or it can be quite a challenging game, if the dice go against you.
Yeah. I think, the fact that you are travellers on the war road kind of tells you what you should be expecting from the game.
Yes.
There's going to be a bit of travel here. So, I don't know. I think if you GM this game, if you play in this game, you have to see travel and distance between adventure sites in terms of distance as well as time. It's a real part of the game.
Yep.
You can't gloss over it. So I think it definitely, you benefit from really thinking about how you're going to handle traveling.
Yeah.
And, I think the rules are okay. They could probably learn a little bit more from the One Ring, but then it becomes, I think, you're just adding in more and more complexity to an already.
There's a lot going on in this game as it is, frankly, isn't there? So
it is. I mean, there's too few critical hit tables, obviously, from my perspective.
Perhaps there's a supplement there, Dave.
Maneuver table in there somewhere, but
I think it's fine. It's if something happens, something happens. If nothing happens, it's quick, which is really all we want. I really dislike systems where it's, you're travelling. How many days worth of water do you have? How much? If we're used to travelling and going up and down this war road, we know where to find water. We know where to find an unsuspecting rabbit.
Yeah.
Please don't make us roll for that, because it's just tedious.
We had enough of that in Dark Sun, didn't we? We exercised that muscle in Dark Sun, and we don't need to do it anymore. I mean,
Dark Sun, Forbidden Land.
Well, Forbidden Land's got its own mechanism for it, so it's actually built in. Whereas in this, you do have rations and you have water and you've got money. And I did sort of like toy with resource dice, then I got bored of the idea. So basically, we don't bother with that stuff. And
we've got, we've got mules. Well, most of us have mules. Some of us sacrificed it to a zombie. But we've got food on the mules, so at the end of the day, we're not going to starve. We've always got something there. So
not that sort of game. Starving in the desert, no. I mean, it's not.
If we were travelling into, say, we were going to go into the Luwafi sands or something like that, by all means, then you're going to have to start looking at resources. But if you're travelling up and down the war road, no, you don't need it. So I like the fact it's fast, and I also like the fact there was that 1 in 10, 2 in 10 chances of combat. But ultimately, I think even for you, Steve, as a GM, do you really want to be describing a track to sand as we go slogging through it?
Not really. I did enough of that in Dark Sun. I mean, my only comment is, say all the potential encounters are combat, which is fine. I mean, there's nothing stopping you, which I've actually done, sort of creating a list of sort of non-combat encounters as well, because that's fun. It would be nice, I think, if that had been included in the book, because again, it's worth probably thinking about who this game is pitched at. Is it for somebody who's come from D&D possibly, or even I mean, it does talk about what is role playing, so potentially for someone who's completely new to role playing, I think that might be a challenge.
Yeah, I think it would. Yeah.
I would have liked to see some positive. If you roll a critical, you've got 1 in 10 chance of meeting somebody who'll be helpful, like another band of jackals who are willing to trade with you or something like that.
You've never played with me before, have you, as a GM, Martin?
Yeah, no, but you're
Steve claims he's fair, but I'm fair on his side.
I don't write the rules. I merely apply them.
You could easily bring that in as a house, depending on
that's the beauty of this, is because we've all been playing and running games for a long time, so we could just chuck stuff in, and it's easy in a percentile system. But I think this system is very open to that. You could add stuff in quite easily without breaking anything. Yeah, and I think house rules like that, absolutely, you could do that. So, I mean, for example, I couldn't be bothered to keep an eye on cash. So basically, I just nicked the idea from Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay that at the end of every sort of adventuring season, use it or lose it, and then you start from 0 at the start. basically just means, it means I'm going to worry about paying for food and lodging and all that sort of boring stuff.
The chances are we had money because we've just built it up.
Because you just killed. Go on.
I was going to say, it's not as though as we're going along, we're going to find the BP hay garage for our mules and spend our money on, like, I don't know, reheated rabbit on a stick.
I mean, you could.
Yeah.
You could. So chapter 7 then is Gazetteer of the War Road. So this is basically, they talk about the various cities, they talk about the people involved, there's sort of a little bit of secret history, so GM only history in there as well. And I think if you're not playing the Travels on the War Road campaign, there's enough hooks in there to get you into it.
Yeah, I think there's enough. It makes it sound like I'm being overly picky. I'm not being picky at all.
No.
I think there is enough in there that you can really, really develop it. I think I think the main thing is you need to think about this as a game that you're going to have campaigns in.
Yeah,
it's not a dip in and out kind of thing. I think it's it's a campaign.
and I think and it's fun anyway. And it rewards the sort of that time investment. Really, I think it's certainly one of those games. I mean, plan to come back to it because we want to finish the second half of the campaign. There's a few games we'll keep coming back to. So obviously, the One Ring is one. Forbidden Lands another one. I think this is one that is good to come back to. Again, the artwork here is great. So it's got maps of the key cities. Some nice sort of different views of different parts of the world as well. So great. It really helps to sort of set the scene. And I think so, obviously when I run this over Foundry using a sort of modified open quest system, because there isn't a sort of a proper sort of system for it. But it's great to have that stuff, to show people, because I think it really sort of sets the scene. I mean, obviously there's an awful lot of names of characters in there.
Do you think you could do with a guide on how to pronounce the names, Steve?
Me personally, yes. I'm from the Midlands.
Just in general for everybody, yeah.
I mean, does it do it in the glossary? I don't know. We just make our own up, don't we? That's fine. Yeah. It's got a Midlands twang to everything. So the first thing it does is the cultural touchstones, which I think probably would have been easy. It would have been better to put right at the start of the book when you're first talking about the cultures. I appreciate the whole point is that suspension of disbelief. We're in a different world here, but it talks. There's a little table and it says Melkoni are Greek, Luathi are Canaanite or ancient Hebrew. But I think that's quite helpful just to go, okay. I mean, yes, it's obvious that the Gur are Egyptians because they wear Egyptian headdresses, but I think that's quite useful to get your head into it, especially some of the other cultures as well.
I would say some of the cultures are a little bit obscure when they start, so you would end up having to do quite a bit of research if you really wanted to, if you weren't really into the area, if you wanted to get a feel for it. I mean, are you an expert on the Hittite Empire, Steve?
Not the Hittites specifically, no. The Akkadian, maybe. No, I'm not an expert. I'm not an expert in anything.
It's going to say, do you know the difference between Minoan Greece and Mycenaean Greece?
No, it's fair to say. But that's what Osprey books are for, Martin.
Yeah. Yeah, no, essentially there are Osprey books to go and buy more of this stuff. It's like,
yeah, always good to sell up.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I think I missed an opportunity there. Like at the end of Melkonia's thing, I should have had Sea Ospreyman at Arms number 15, 17, 24.
Yeah. Upsell.
Yeah. Upsell.
Then there's quite a big section on the calendar. Okay, so the calendar's quite important in this game. I mean, there's 3 moons, and it talks about the different phases of the moon. It starts to go into the sort of the your point, Martin, earlier on about, or maybe it was Andrew, about sort of the various holy days. It's got a lot of that stuff in there, and there's more in Travellers in the War Road. I mean, I just haven't really done much with that. I've just gone, it's the wet season or it's the dry season, because we'll talk a bit more about seasonal actions, but basically you get a couple of adventures during the wet season, have a time off, like downtime, seasonal activities, and then you have a couple more adventures in the dry season and vice versa. And that's as far as I've gone with it. And this is just my point about there's a lot of space, words spent on calendars. I think a non-combat encounter table probably may have been more useful. But obviously, this is quite important to JM, and she's why he put it in.
I'm not sure how many games I've ever played where I've given a toss about the calendar, or even days of the week.
Yeah, I know.
What day is it today? It's Tuesday. No, it's not. It's flibbity gibbet. No. Yeah. It's Tuesday.
Yeah, it doesn't. I think it's quite complicated. I think I mean, it's great. It's additional colour. I don't use it in our game. I just go, is it the wet season or is it the dry season?
Yeah.
Every season, everyone has a couple of adventures, then we have a break, and that's it. So that's the level I'm down with it with,
If you wanted it to be a holy day or a holiday or anything else, well, then just build it
Just
into the
make it.
scenario.
Just say it. No, absolutely.
Yeah, I'd like to know a bit more guidance on the calendar, because they kind of give you the calendar and it's very well explained,
Yeah.
but they don't tell you what you're going to be doing with it, because none of this is really important to jackals.
Yeah.
They're going to be harvesting. And I mean, okay, fair enough. Most communities will only hire jackals twice per season, but that can be any time. I mean, it's not as though they go, oh, well, it's dry season, we're busy harvesting, sod off, come back in wet season. They don't do that. I don't know, a bit more guidance, because it is very well thought out, actually, looking at it.
Yeah. I mean, there's a huge amount of thought that's gone into the game. And I say the calendar is, really important to it. And again, if you're, I suppose, in that culture or those cultures, then the calendar is critical, especially if you've, gods are real and all that sort of stuff.
I'm just wondering if something got cut out, like they were missing 2 pages that they decided to edit out for some reason, because it just feels like there should be something else there.
I was going to say, but there's nothing. They talk about the months, and the 10 days forming a transitional time between years, and then there's nothing. It feels like a Gloranthan sacred time.
Yeah.
So you think, well, okay, so what happens there? Because that would have been quite nice to.
Yeah, I don't know, and actually and we haven't really touched on this because I didn't sort of, get too far into the calendar side of it. In the Fall of the Children of Bronze, that is sort of a where you progress over the years. So basically, you guys, I think, have been adventuring for something like 4 years by this point, actually. But it probably hasn't felt like that because we haven't really made a big issue about the calendar. Although you have had seasonal actions, which is sort of between each season. But it's as I say, it's just another thing to juggle as a GM. And it doesn't seem to be important enough to put that much time into it. Okay, so the next in this chapter, there's a lot in this chapter in terms of running the game, chapter 8. Then it talks about corruption. So again, corruption, the whole thing is about law and order. So if you do sort of unlawful things, you can gain corruption points. And also traveling can give you corruption. And certain creatures can sort of, cause you to become corrupt. Almost like, darkness point, shadow points in the One Ring. So certain spells can do that as well. And also you can take on corruption by, undertaking blood magic, which is very powerful, but, causes corruption. We haven't really done a lot with that. I mean, you haven't come across a lot of things that cause corruption. I mean, to be honest, you're not really murder hobos anyway. You're not going around nicking. I mean, I gave you an opportunity to nick some merchant's treasure and then you took it back. And this is very early on. You don't go around just murdering people. So, I think if you had more of a murder hobo-y sort of party, then probably more of an issue. But for you guys, it's not so much of a thing.
It'd be interesting to see how it goes in play.
Yeah.
Because if somebody does start to pick up some of them are quite amusing. Certainly when your extremities start to rot and fall off. Surely at that point you're going to say, I think I'm going to retire my character. He's not got any fingers left.
You might want to think about attaining threats. Might need to stop it. But
I'm going to have to say, if the minor thing is your hand falling off, I'm a bit worried what you're going to consider the more worse option.
Major thing, we'll draw a veil over that, shall we? But and you can, as you say, Andrew, you can atone. So one of the seasonal actions is to go, and in fact, Ocker did that. He sort of went back to his tribe and sort of got rid of corruption points. I think you guys are pretty stringent about your corruption hygiene as characters. So.
He just fancied some nice tattoos, Steve. Really.
Yeah, it wouldn't absolutely.
It's not been a big thing in this campaign, to be honest.
No,
I don't think we've
not yet.
So we're not those sort of characters, which kind of helps.
But. Yeah, you're not. You're very, very lawful.
We maybe, as a group, haven't taken enough risks like that.
Well, I think the thing is, it's quite a dangerous game, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we've tended to find sort of physical ways or intellectual ways of getting out of anything like that.
Yeah.
So maybe we need to be put under a bit more pressure, I think, for the darkness to start coming for us properly.
We're the midpoint of the campaign, and because I love the scenarios in the north, because the north and the south, and really the way it's written is it's supposed to be you play in the south or you play in the north. And I just thought those scenarios are so good in the north. I'm just going to send you to the north, and we're going to do some of those. So actually, I've expanded out the first part of the campaign because I thought it didn't want to waste the maps and the cool stuff. So anyway, there you go. That's just me.
Good.
Okay, all right. So then it talks about additional rules, things about light and darkness. Again, I think probably would have been nice to have those earlier on. So to try and because I like rule books where the rules are they're all in one place, so you can reference them quite easily. And I say light and darkness, it doesn't talk about zones so much, but basically if you're in a room and you've got one torch, it's partially light. Basically, you need 3 torches in a room to be considered to be actual light. And if you've got fewer than that, then it actually costs you more clash points. So if you've only got one torch, really, it should be really punitive. But again, I think that's probably, I don't know.
I'm taking another right as soon as I can, the one where I can actually cast light.
Cast light, that's a good one. Yeah, I like it.
But that goes back to what I said earlier about, if you've got 3 characters and they're each carrying a weapon or shield or 2 weapons or a bow or something, it's like they can't be carrying torches as well, realistically, unless they've got a shield or something to mount it. So it's like it just feels like a bit of a sort of punishment. It's like, well, you could be wielding 2 weapons, but unfortunately, you've got to carry this torch. It just feels.
No, I get you, and I suppose it's like, actually, is it fun to worry about? I mean, some games that's part of the core experience. So Forbidden Lands, scrabbling.
I wouldn't call that fun, to be fair. It's
scrabbling around a dungeon looking for a torch. That's the core game experience, where it doesn't seem to be so much in this one.
I think the problem is when we first started, those rules were. I'm pretty sure in our first few dungeons that it should have been a lot darker than it was, but it would have been bad. But now we can attract followers. I mean, stay around for a bit of the treasure. All you've got to do is hold a torch up.
Go and hold the torches for us. You get a share of the treasure. Happy days. Or you might get pushed into combat with something that will mince you, which often happens.
Oh, come off it. Uriah now will have his bigger share of the treasure. I mean, we'll buy him better armor. He's survived. He's coming back a hero. I mean,
absolutely.
Well, yes, he is, and we've still got to fight the big baddie. But yes, potentially he's coming back a hero.
Yeah, and so in this section, light and darkness, and that conversation will go on. We'll play and play, I'm sure. There's also the rules you expect about falling disease. I just find it a bit odd that it's at the back rather than the sort of the main part of the rules. Encounter tables.
I think I've tried to make them GM rules, haven't I? Basically, so it's sort of little mini DMG, isn't it? Basically, the book.
Yeah, I don't. Well, I mean, it's a choice, isn't it? I mean, personally, and I say my own reference sheets anyway, so I sort of put them all together. But it's a bit. I find it a bit. Oh, right, where those rules are flipping to the back or whatever. I don't see because the rules are there for everybody, aren't there? There's nothing hidden. Maybe things like corruption, absolutely, those stay at the back. But stuff I think it's just get out there. It takes. That means everyone gets to try and think about the rules rather than just the GM. And that's how I see it anyway. Next bit is the encounter tables. So there's loads of those for different parts of the war road. I think they're pretty extensive, and obviously it links to the bestiary, which we'll talk about in a second. It talks about, so the next bit is about equipment modifications. There's a lot around. So each settlement will have their own red smith, their own smith, and first time you meet up with a smith, you're supposed to roll to see what their specialty is. It's quite involved. I mean, it can be great. So I think you guys ran into a red smith that just seemed to have a brilliant. Actually, it wasn't a very good red smith, but it was a brilliant leather worker and could make really good armor.
You can make spears as well.
Yeah, really good at spears. Okay, but it's equally possible to have a red smith that's really bad at making axes or something. Okay, and just really poor at it. And as a jackal, the only way you'd know, the price doesn't reduce. The only way you'd know about it is by making a trade roll to go, actually, is this any good or not? And it just feels like, so you bought an axe and it's not very good.
If you've got a high trade roll, you might as well make the stuff yourself, mightn't you?
Yeah, craft roll maybe, or talk him down, in terms of price. It's good. I like it. It's in there. It's a bit involved. But I think, sometimes it can throw up good stuff. But
I quite like it, to be honest, because it gives you a catch. If you roll on the person's crap at buying an axe, and you've already said you're buying it, it's tough luck.
Well, I mean, you should. If somebody hands you an axe where the head's hanging off and mustard and stuff, you should be able to say, "Mate, this is a bit rubbish."
I just like the fact that the recipe can be crap. You might buy from him anyway, but the trade allows you to figure out whether it's crap, because it's not going to be like Andrew said. It's not going to be held together by gaffer tape.
Yeah.
it's going to look okay. It's going to be the equivalent of a shiny pony. It looks okay, but the moment the rain hits it, then it washes off and you've got a donkey.
Yeah.
That's what your axe is. And the trade allows you to realise that.
Yeah.
And I like it. I don't have a problem with it. It adds a little bit extra to the game. And ultimately, Jackals do get a lot of cash, and you could just willy-nilly go to spending it.
Yeah, so you get quite a lot of cash. I mean, the scenario in the rule book, the first one you played, which was those sort of youths went missing and been sort of kidnapped by Takan. They they misprinted the rewards, and I think you got like 15 shekels each. And then in the sort of later scenario, it's like, here's 500 shekels each for doing things anyway. But
having said that, stuff is not cheap.
no, it's not.
A lot of stuff that's around, 1,000 shekels or something.
Horses are incredible.
Yeah, horses.
Horses, plate armor. It's all kind of.
But yeah.
Yeah, and Odysseus is not allowed a horse, not after what he did to his mule.
Wow.
I mean, so I would say that I like the fact you can get the masterwork stuff, and I like the fact that it is kind of expensive. But I think some of the basic equipment. I mean, I guess we are trying to reflect the Bronze Age, and bronze plate armor is goddamn expensive. But I mean, it might be that obviously you take money off us at the end of the season. You'll say if you don't spend it, I'm taking it off you. So there isn't really a chance to save up for the more expense.
Yeah, I suppose so. And I mean, that's just so I haven't got to account for like payment.
You don't want to be messing about with everybody saying, "Oh, I've got 978 shekels or something."
Yeah, and there's not really a bank to put it in. But anyway, there you go.
So I guess different GMs would say, "Oh yeah, you can save up for a horse," or save up for a panoply or something. But
maybe I'll say you can put a deposit down as long as the cash is out of your pocket at the end of each season. I don't care. If you want to put it down as a down payment on your bronze panoply, then you can do that.
One leg on the horse.
Leg on the horse, yeah, if you're lucky. Okay, so moving on then. So the next bit is about magic items and treasures. So again, this is a sort of a variant of that. I mean, they've got some nice sort of pre-made magic items, but there's things you can sort of discover, and this is more for the GM really to sort of just create them. And so one thing that's hidden away in here, which is great, but rarely if ever happened, or I think it's almost happened once. Okay, there's this thing called awakening an item to greatness. So basically, if you've got your weapon, right, if you roll to hit, okay, and then you fail, and then you spend a fate point to re-roll, if you get a critical, then your item could awaken to greatness, and you have to roll, I think it's your wisdom or devotion or something times 3, and if it's that or less, then that item becomes a magic item and it's awakened to greatness, right? I mean, it's a brilliant idea. I think it almost happened once that I spotted. I think when you were in the darkness over Micro, and I think something happened there, and then someone failed the follow-up roll, and I just thought to myself, oh, that's a bit disappointing. So I quite like the idea of that, and we did it in when we played RuneQuest, didn't we? If you got criticals, then it basically increased your chance of, was it chance to hit, or I can't remember what we
it's 5% for every critical.
Yeah.
You've got to name an item as well, and if you've got
better over time. Yeah.
If you've got like four criticals, you've got like a special ability and stuff.
That's quite cool. So I might reintroduce that in that case then, but because again, it's hidden away in here, and it's easy to miss it. But yeah,
I was going to pick a bone with you, Steve.
Go on then.
I don't think you've ever used the treasure found table.
No, we haven't. No one ever bothers finding treasure.
That shows what a tight GM you are.
I am.
Do look around
because every monster's supposed to have a treasure rating. We should be getting stuff.
Okay, in my defence, every room has usually got a load of treasure in it anyway. So, and Takan, you go, oh, I'm not touching them because they've got diseases. So. But yeah, no, you're right. You're right. I never have used the treasure tables. You've been robbed.
We have been robbed.
I think you forgot about it.
What you can do, Martin, is remind me about it next time.
Oh, I will be. Have you rolled on the treasure table? Yes, there's nothing.
I killed that little tack in his onesie. Where's his top and segment?
The tacker in a onesie. That was my favourite creation. I loved that. It was brilliant.
Oh, if there was ever something people wanted to kill on site, that was it.
It wasn't really a onesie. It was like a sort of a weird, like, skin outfit he got on, but it just did look like a onesie.
It looked like a onesie.
Okay, all right. No, that's a good point, Martin. I think, I think those sort of things, because there's lots of stuff in this game. It's easy to miss things because it's a small book, but there's an awful lot in here. Then it talks about hirelings. Basically, we've talked about those, so you pick those up, and those can become characters later on. So, when your characters retire, you might have a hireling, like Uriah, for example, might spend quite a few scenarios with you, assuming it survives. But then he might become your follow up next character if you want to. But anyway, and also it's good to have additional meat shields, isn't it? Then it goes into something called Kleos. So basically, this is like your profile, your sort of fame in the Zaharets, and it's based on the number of advancements you get, but also the number of, sometimes you get a free point of Kleos, and it goes from 1 to, what's it go to, 1 to 12 or something,
10.
1 to 10. Okay. And as you go further up there, you're able to, the more famous you are, you're able to get patrons. So this is my point about, yes, Jackals are out there on the fringes, but by having a patron, which I think, obviously Shuma's got Bat End Afar as a patron now, that then starts to tie you more into the communities, because that having a patron means you can build a home, you can sort of build your own barracks and all this sort of stuff. You can sort of have that almost like a bit of a base set up, but also it means that the more famous you are, the more you attract the forces of evil. So there's a way of balancing encounters, but the higher Kleos you've got, the more likely you are to get sort of more bad guys after you as well. So it's quite got that. And then you can have dreams in there as well. So you get dreams sent by the gods as you become more of a hero. It's almost like it's like getting rune level as you get to a certain point in RuneQuest. You become more of a sort of mover and shaker in the world.
It will become important if you're playing in a big campaign, won't it?
Yeah, if you're just doing a one-off, no one gives a stuff, do they? Basically,
yeah. How do you develop it? Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And then I'll talk about seasonal actions, and then I'll give you guys a chance to say something. So, seasonal actions again. I say, there's a wet season, a dry season. In between, there's a range of things you can do. So, each character gets to do a thing. So we talked about atonement. You can carouse. Get more. Increase your fame, gain a patron, all this sort of stuff. And then there's always, finally, there's the option of retirement. If your character is a little bit, beaten up or whatever it might be, you think, actually, I'll, turn them into an NPC. They carry on living in the world, then you can have another character which comes in and you get a retirement benefit. So you're not starting from scratch. Actually, all the effort you've put into playing your character is sort of reflected in your next one as well. So it's more of a continuation, a bonus, rather than a sort of a downside.
But I think the Kleos is interesting. Ock hasn't got very much Kleos yet, but he'll build it up. It'll be interesting to see how you use it to advance your character. Seasonal actions, I think if you've played the recent versions of RuneQuest RQG, you'll be quite happy with the seasonal actions. They're quite a useful thing to have. And it all builds the world.
Yeah.
So you can go home and you can go and see your tribe and say, hey, look what I've done.
And I think if you're sort of a ritualist and you again, we didn't touch on this in the rights, but you can only learn certain rights in certain places. So if you're a Gerwa or a Malconi, actually you need to travel a long way or be in a certain place to be able to learn a right. And one of the seasonal actions is you just travel, learn a right, or potentially learn a right and come back. Yes, you might lose some metal at the start of the next adventure, but it sort of means you can, you're not stuck in one place and you can't build your character up as you want to.
But some of the things I do wonder about how much they get played. Like we establish a home, the barracks, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because are you really going to... Suddenly it becomes a simulation, or it becomes like Civilization or something. I'm going to build a barracks, I'm going to build a foundry or a hostel, and I'm going to have a hanging garden next. And
we haven't really got into that because, I mean, you guys have only got sort of one who's got a patron at the moment, which is Shuma.
The whole kind of building a thing, again, that's a bit like RuneQuest Planter, where you've got that kind of yearly action of actually doing, running your homes. I think you can run homestead role, isn't there? Manage household role.
Yeah.
So some people enjoy that aspect of role playing. Some people don't.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just you don't have to do it. It's just a nice to do. Yeah. I mean, you can have a patron which has got its own benefits.
Yeah, I mean, there's enough in seasonal actions for you to, you can carouse once a year, you can travel to learn rights or anything as much as you want, you can atone if you've got corruption, it's again, that's something we haven't had to do apart from Opera, but
the option is there, which is it's nice to have that, as you say, Martin. But I think it's certainly not in the same league as building a stronghold in Forbidden Lands, which is frankly horrible. The system for that, it is accountancy. It's just horrible. Whereas we haven't played through it yet, and we may do that. You guys are in the process of establishing a home in the city of Centim at the moment, so that might be something you come back to. But it'd be interesting to sort of work through that. But I think it's quite nice that option is there.
I think that's possibly in the Kleos, and also with the with the sort of the, as you said, becoming sort of more or differently effective at higher, the want of term, levels.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing with the game. There are so many things that it's almost like you don't immediately get access to all the rules. Over a period of time, you'll start to bring more and more bits into it and complexity and stuff. So, again, that sort of development in terms of standing and in terms of influence and fame, I guess, again, it's massively rewards campaign play, and you'll come across it as you get into the game a lot more, which is good.
Yeah.
It's not that there's just, this are the rules, that's it.
Yeah.
It's the same at level 20 as it is at level 1.
Yeah.
There's nuance in it.
And you want a game that's going to expand. You're going to get more depth out as you play. Really, and I think as you say, it rewards that ongoing investment of time. Because we're all, busy gamers. We've only got a certain amount of time and even look. I'm just looking at this massive box of Pathfinder on my shelf here, which is just
yes. Looking at similar with that. Looking all my bloody Cthulhu stuff I've not played.
Oh my God. Anyway, but yeah. So as I say, we have to be, so discerning with our time, and I think this rewards that. So chapter 9 is the bestiary. I think there's a really nice spread of creatures in here. It sort of gives a whole range. So you've got and they're all quite flavourful. So you've got the spin on the undead. So you've got the Rapiuma, who is the sort of the zombies, if you like, and you've got the Atema, which are the spirits. You've got some pretty nasty creatures in here as well. You've got some pretty tough ones. You've got the Takan, which is like the beast creatures, sort of the primary foe, if you like, in the War Road. There's some encounter building guidelines in here, which I think probably are okay for starting characters, but I think you need to make it a challenge. I think you need to sort of edge it upwards a bit as you go along, which is always the case in every game.
Is there an equivalent about challenge rating? Do you know, or do you have to kind of look at the creature and think that's about the right level?
Yeah. So what they do is they say, okay, so how many characters are there? So if let's say you've got a party of 4 characters, so for an easy encounter or for a standard encounter, you pick enough creatures to equal clash points. So a clash point for a Takan, an Orakan, like a weasel creature thing, rat man. They get half a clash point each. So for a party of 4 characters, you could have 8 of these Norican. That would be a standard encounter. And then what you do is you make it 12 for a more challenging encounter.
See, that sounds, given what Martin was talking about earlier, that sounds quite tough because, in terms of clash points, getting caught out by multiple opponents is actually quite a bad thing, because although those things don't do a lot of damage, if there's a lot of them and you run out of clash points, they're doing a constant 2d6 every round.
Yeah, and usually they don't come by themselves. So you can mix it up as well. Yeah, they've got those big creatures, those big gorilla beasts called the Mavakan, which I think that's what they spent. Those are the ones that sort of utterly failed in the last time that you were.
Those are the comedy ones, aren't they?
The comedy ones, yeah. But yeah, and I think, as you say, when you get animosity, then you say, well, okay, you count as though you've got an extra 2 or more characters in the party. So now you guys, if Dave's around, that's 4, 5. Your animosity would be an extra 7. So you get 7 clash points worth of beasts against you in that case.
I think 14 of those little Takan would be a hell of a fun.
Yeah, potentially, especially if they caught you in the dark, because they're not bothered by the darkness at all. Inured to darkness they are. And there's some quite nice things like the Rapiuma, and I think this is one of the things that Dave fell afoul of, is they've got something called the Chill of the Grave. And so basically, if you're spending time in...
we're losing 2. Was it 2 metal or 2...
It's 2...
every round?
It's 2 Valor.
2 Valor
every round. And I think Dave's character, Usalek, charged straight into the centre, so he was losing 10 Valor at the start of every round.
Yeah.
And that's what did it for his... his character survived, but a bit dodgy. One thing I will say I really like is the stat blocks. So I talked about the combat range. So basically, you just, as a GM, you roll, and if you're successful, you just look at the combat range. So, for example, if someone's got a skill of 40%, then usually if you roll 1 to 10, they'll do one thing. If you roll sort of 11 to 20, they do something else. And you don't have to think about it too much, which I quite like that, because I wanted to think about, frankly. It does get a bit complicated. We've got that interplay with multiple attacks and stuff.
And also makes encounters interesting.
Yeah.
You don't have the same thing happening every time you encounter this particular Mavakan.
Yeah.
One time it beats the hell out of you. The next time it tries to grapple you, or it sort of tries to eat you.
Yeah.
There's it's again. I think it's he's thought about designing the game, And what he's done is he said there's going to be elements of difference in here.
Mm.
It's not going to be, okay, it's a displacer beast.
Yeah.
So you know exactly what it's going to do every turn.
Yeah.
There is a difference. There are things that they can do that make not only the encounter more interesting, but actually can mean you are either in a deadly situation or you might get out of this.
Mm. Yeah.
And that's, I think, the exciting thing in terms of the encounters that we had. There were some bits where you'd think, oh, if it's a dragon, it's just going to give me, a breath weapon.
Yeah.
Whereas we would encounter something and you're thinking, what the hell are they going to do?
Yeah,
how is it going to counter it? So I think it was good.
Yeah.
I think he's obviously thought about it, and I like the way he's presented it as well.
Yeah. I think it takes so much, and there's enough load in this game on the GM as it is. I think, in combat encounters, it just takes that pressure off. And it's, Year Zero engine do that a lot, like Alien, for example. It's just, I like it. And I think, in fact, we're going to, in one of the future Talking Tools sub-pods, we're going to talk about bringing that into games where it doesn't exist, and how do you do that? Or taking existing creatures and turning them into that. Is it Mythic Babylon? The sort of the Mythros supplement. Have you come across that one? It's this big fat book, big huge fat book, but there's loads of like monsters from Babylonia in there, like mythic monsters, and it'd be great to take some of those and turn them into, creatures. So I might have a bit of a go at that one. But that's on the list of things to do in gaming, alongside all the other things I'm doing in gaming. But yeah,
I think they're flavoursome. Yeah, I think they fit the setting.
Mm.
Yeah,
They are tough. I think that's the interesting thing, is they are potentially quite tough. There's not a lot of mooks in there, or even the mooks can actually really badly damage you.
Yeah.
Even those little attacking you can't one shot. They'll take 2 or 3 hits before they go down.
Yeah, and they've always got a chance of criticalling. Obviously, the more dice you're rolling as a sort of a GM with a bunch of adversaries, the more chance you've got to hit. And I say, if they start generating 3 attacks, on a useful hit, then each of those can potentially critical. And so, you could be,
and it burns through your clash points as well, because
absolutely.
Most people have probably got an average of 5 clash points.
Mm.
If you get, 2 of those, each doing 3 attacks, that's all your clash points gone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
So and it's quite nice. It's quite easy to put sort of encounters together, and you got a good range. So obviously you guys got attacked by those trapdoor spiders, which I had fun with, which was good. And there's lots of other stuff in there as well. So there's some real, there's things obviously influenced by sort of, Middle Ancient Near Eastern sort of mythology. You got like sort of multi-headed dragons, and so those are really tough. You haven't come across one of those yet. All sorts of stuff. So and then the book is rounded off by 3 adventures. I mean, you played one of them. They're actually pretty good. I mean, they're sort of standard, but they're quite good adventures. And they've got great maps that go with them as well. Lovely isometric maps. A badly needed glossary, so a glossary of the world terms, and also a little about sort of the game terms as well, and a useful index, which is always, and it's hyperlinked in the PDF as well, so that makes life an awful lot easier. Cool. All right. So overall, then I think we quite like it, don't we?
Yeah. Good. Yeah, I do like it. I also like the fact that it's from it's maybe one of those games where everybody knows about it.
It's a great game. I really enjoy it. I think you could probably, as with all these things, benefit from a revised edition at some point. But whatever.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, not. It's an area of that Middle Eastern, Mediterranean sort of culture.
Mm.
It's always appealed to me.
Yeah.
So the minute I saw it, it was like, okay, Bronze Age. Come on, I'm having that.
Yeah.
And it was instantly appealing. But I think there is enough to the game that extended play makes it it's a big bonus from that perspective.
Absolutely.
I think, as you said, it just needs maybe a little bit of fine tuning on some of the bits and pieces.
Yeah.
But
what game doesn't need that? What game that hasn't been around 20 years doesn't need that, frankly? So I think it's
Middle Earth role playing is probably the perfect.
Well, it came fully formed, didn't it? It was perfect from conception. Immaculate.
Well,
All right. Good stuff. All right. Thanks very much for taking part anyway. Take it
All right,
steady.
see you
All
later.
right. See you
Cheers,
soon.
Steve.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers, mate.
First of all, thanks very much for taking the time.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me on. This is awesome.
So, first of all, it's amazing that we've managed to con another person who knows what they're talking about onto this podcast. So, just a quick couple of minutes from you in terms of who you are, what you do. Jackals, tell us a little bit about it.
Okay, so my name is JM DeFoge, or John Matthew DeFoge. I go by JM. I am the writer of Jackals and Urban Decay, another game that uses the Clash system. I also have a publishing company called Strange Owl Games. We put out the new version of Space 1889. We have another Clash game that came out, Amboria. We're in the process of wrapping up that Kickstarter. I do a lot of weird things as well. I write for Savage Worlds. I write for 13th Age. I'm the line developer for 13th Age. I do Savage Universe, and I've got several adventures published with Savage Worlds. I have a lot of plate spinning. I'm an amateur RPG historian. I do the history of Palladium books with the guys over at Palladium Books on their YouTube channel. So
you're everywhere,
Jackals,
aren't you? I've been watching your Savage Worlds content actually, because I'm sort of gone back into Savage Worlds. Second bite of the cherry, because I just bounced off it the first time with Savage Rifts. And so I've this year I am running it at a couple of conventions, and that's going to be my convention game of choice. I'm just making myself find the Fast Furious fun.
If you have any questions, reach out to me. I love talking about Savage Worlds. I got to write. I think the coolest thing I've written a couple of like their Savage Saturday Cinema adventures, but the coolest thing that I got to write for them so far, things I can't talk about, but so far, the new Necessary Evil that came out, which is their sort of superhero suicide squad, right? Aliens kill all the superheroes, and now you're playing villains. When the new one came out, I wrote the GM adventure, and they were like, we want something that kind of bridges the first two with the cosmic, and so I got to write this homage to like all of the Silver Age Marvel comics that I love. So some guy's trying to steal the Beyonders' cosmic energy and, ascend to godhood, and the heroes have to stop them.
Crazy stuff like that. It was
a lot of fun.
Yeah. I mean, we are probably about halfway through playing through the All the Children of Bronze campaign, which I'm really enjoying.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's great. Really enjoying the system, really enjoying the campaign.
Yeah, it's really good.
Very cool.
And the first thing that jumped out to us was the artwork, which is great. Yeah, another one of our players, they were saying just how consistent it is, and also just how evocative it is as well. And from my perspective, because I run all my games on Foundry pretty much, I love the isometric maps because it makes it so easy to set up on Foundry, because I like the whole isometric thing. So is that something that was really important to you in terms of the art side of things? How much influence did you have on that?
So what's interesting is I lucked out. The guys at Osprey Games had just an amazing stable of artists. And so I had, when I started the concept of Jackals, I was kind of suckered into writing Jackals. I had met Phil over at Osprey. We were talking about history, and I was talking about this campaign. And so we struck up a friendship. We still talk almost on a daily basis. And after about a year, he's like, so what are you not liking about it? I was running an Adventure Conqueror King, which I love, but it wasn't a great fit for what I wanted to do. And one of the things I do when I'm running a long-term campaign is I buy art for monsters and characters. And so I had commissioned almost all of the Takan. Mm-hmm. And I had commissioned one of each of the kind of the iconics, if you will, for each of the culture. And so I had all of that. And so when we went to, when we started doing art, they were like, well, what do you want to see? And so I did a huge art write-up. In fact, the image in the core book of that jackal kind of lying on that stone wall with the blood dripping down.
Yeah, I know that one.
And there's the frieze. That's what I wanted for the cover. And they were like, it's not a great cover because it looks like the character's already dead, but we'll put it in the book. So I was able to I was able to do some of the art direction. I was able to turn over all of the art pieces that I had commissioned. And I mean, I had worked with the artist for no, this is what what the tattoos should look like. This is what the imagery should be on it.
Yeah.
And I was grateful to also have one of my early playtesters. She's an artist. And so she did these, and I still want to put them out. I think maybe that'll be one of the things I release this year.
Okay.
She did beautiful watercolor tarot cards for each of the ritualist paths.
Okay.
So I just need to learn how to get that all set up on drive-through cards, and then get people like you can print out the ritualist cards and then have them at the table, which I think would be really cool. So I was able to work on that.
There's loads of different ways you can deal those cards out on Foundry, and some sort of game mechanism to go with them would be
awesome.
Yeah,
it would be awesome.
Amazing.
I love running on Foundry. That's my preferred virtual tabletop.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Yeah, so I was able to be involved with that, but like the guy who did the first book and then half of the third book, he was unavailable, unfortunately, for Fall of the Children of Bronze. But the artist they got for Fall of the Children of Bronze was fantastic. The guy who did the original was the lead concept artist on the RuneScape video game.
Okay. All right.
And so he was just used to bringing things to life. And I think they both artists, I feel bad that I'm going to pull out their names.
I was just looking at the cover of the Fall of the Children of Bronze, and you say it's a different artist for that one, but that is this. It's so active. You can almost the taste the dust.
John McCambridge. And who was the other one? John McCambridge did the first book and part of the third, and then Travelers on the War Road. I did the art direction for the cover as well. So it's because it's so my training, if you will, my master's is in theology and Bronze Age cultures and mythology. So I really wanted this to hit historic notes, but it was really important for me. So they would come back with a couple of things. I'm like, well, that's Iron Age or that's Roman. Can't have that. And the artists were great. Yeah, they were great.
We really like the cultures. We think they're really good. I mean, I'm playing in Malconi because I'm a huge fan of kind of classical Greece. So I've one character on the sort of unknown early years of Odysseus. So
wonderful. He
was a prince rather than a king.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And he's very tough. Your character, isn't he, Andrew? Yeah. So obviously, you see these books on the shelves, or you sort of see the PDFs, and obviously it's the art that makes it's great. Pick that up and get stuck into it. But when we were playing, we were talking through the game itself, and obviously, academic background, and you're interested in ancient Near East. I hope I've got that right.
Yeah.
So and that comes through in the cultures and the lore. But one thought from my perspective was there's a lot there, and I know you're obviously a huge Glorantha fan. Okay, and I mean I compare this to Jarun, so Skyrims of Jarun, insofar as there's a lot of names for things which you don't need to know them, but it's it's part of the culture, and so it's not quite as bad as Jarun, I'll be honest. Okay. I just wonder, is that something that has been a sort of a barrier to entry? What's the feedback been from the community about the whole cultures, the lore, the sort of the different names for different types of ritualists, for example?
Yeah. So there was one review that stood out that was like, this is, it's nice because the history is there, but then I get all these fantasy names and, it breaks the immersion for me, which, okay, I'm a firm believer that no game should be for everyone. And not every person should love every game. Like there are role-playing games that I'm just like,
nope.
That's fair. So I've not had a lot of most people who have contacted me and talked about it. They're like, listen, it's familiar enough that I can just jump in. And so when it comes to you think about Greyhawk or Forgotten Realms, where it's really divorced from our world. Here, from what the feedback I've gotten, what people like is they can go, okay, like you said, Andrew, the Melkoni are the Greeks.
Yeah.
I know basically the lore. Let me just figure out the names that are a little bit different. So I've not heard that it's a barrier to entry.
Okay.
But it's Earth adjacent, but it's really supposed to be its own fantasy world. And so I tried to make all of the cultural names at least to be internally cohesive. I have a little bit of a glossary that I'm working on. I'm not like the guy who did Amboria, I think, has created several con languages for his world. And I'm like, he's a philologist.
Okay, well, that's the Tolkien
theologian historian.
Thing,
so yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I think it didn't discourage me. I think it's just, it's interesting in terms of the time that you say you don't have to, but the time that you can spend to make sure you're doing it right, that you are, it is correct. 'Cause obviously you've spent a lot of time doing it, and so you want to, be true to that, or at least to sort of get that. Because when I play these games, I like to sort of get into the rules and into the lore and try and understand, get the whole game experience. But one thing that occurred to me was, obviously it's Osprey, so people may see this, that might be their first ever role-playing game. And you might have people who sort of come from other big gaming properties, and maybe this is their first outside, let's say D&D, they might come, the first venture outside possibly. I mean, was it important to you this is something that could be accessible to new players, or was it in your head, was it actually this is more likely to be someone who's more interested in, maybe come through a RuneQuest lens, for example? Or...
Yeah. So, I mean, it's built off the chassis of OpenQuest 2. So I knew going into it that this game was definitely going to be for people who like D100 games. And like, right, there's a fundamental, like, foundational difference between games that are based off the D100 and games that are based off the D20. And again, my love of Glorantha, I've got the big Gendertella map on that wall, like the 6-panel.
Your man. He's a massive drone supplier.
I love Greg Stafford's world and his comments on. I actually have an article coming out in a book that's coming out about like role playing games as liturgy, because Greg Stafford talked so much about how role-playing games feed this part of our soul that the modern world has kind of stripped away. Yeah. So yeah, I saw one review that was basically like, come on, the JM, this is just Glorantha with the serial numbers filed off. I'm like, not entirely. Like, this is sort of my love letter to Glorantha. Yeah. But I knew that was a smaller thing, like a smaller section of the market. But one of the things that Osprey Games and I talked about is they were probably the right publisher for it, because most people come to Osprey Games through Osprey itself. And so like people part of my research was they sent me just, a stack, 2 feet high.
How cool is that?
Of all of the Bronze Age military books that I wanted to make sure. So that was part of going back to art direction. I was able to say, no, go to this Osprey book on this page. That's what I'm talking about. So I think Osprey is a great publisher for it, because they just have people who
draw those people in. Yeah, love people get it.
They get this historical side of it.
This is something we talked about earlier. There's some of the end of the cult descriptions you could almost have, like, see Osprey Men at Arms number 15, 17, 24. Yeah, exactly. Because I spent both Steve and I have got like quite vast collections of Osprey Men at Arms books. So certainly I have the ancient ones anyway.
It's fair to say. Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, it's interesting really, because I think because we're all, as you can tell, greybeard. I've played a lot of role-playing games over the years, and sort of got a certain level of experience and expertise. And so the background and the lore, it was like, yep, that's interesting. I knew that I ran a RuneQuest campaign for like almost 5 years, and it's fair to say I skated over the surface of Glorantha. You don't need to know all that stuff. I mean, yeah, great if you do, but that's fine. So I was prepared to sort of to go beyond that, and I tend to get into, I like the sort of the rules and the crunch of these sort of things as well. And so we basically went through your book chapter by chapter, or the books chapter by chapter. And we started talking about this whole metal, wounds, and valor thing. At first glance, it can be a bit complicated to get your head around, but we really liked that setup. I think certainly like with metal, obviously with travel being a core part of the game, really, although it's fairly quick, actually it makes a difference if your metal reduced, because you're more tired when you get to the the combat sort of thing. And and obviously wounds are very important. Once you get into your wounds, then you're in trouble. Everyone knows that. Where did that come from, that whole mechanic from your...
So if you had asked me when I had put it together where that came from, I would have said, I don't know, it just felt right to me. Because one of the things I wanted was, I kept wanting to go back to the source material. And so you would have like these fights in the Iliad that would go on for several lines with no one taking, like, they would become exhausted essentially. And then all of a sudden, throat punch or, stabbed through what is essentially the Greek word for nipple, right? Because you get stabbed in the chest. Lots of nipple wounds in the Iliad, in the original Greek. That does not get Fagles does not translate.
It's not in Troy, is it? That film? No.
Yeah, no. And so one of the things I liked that I wanted to have this, like, because they kept talking about like fighting spirit and like getting their wind back, and so I wanted a mechanic to represent that. But I also like very deadly games. Rob Hainso jokes that all BRP games have sanity, but in RuneQuest your sanity is your limbs. You lose them and they don't come back. Yeah. And I like that. I wanted something deadly, but I wanted something that, because the goal is that you start off as like a guy, and if you play long enough, you're going to feel like a demigod. And so I needed some buffer there. And So the metal and valor interaction worked out really well, and then the wounds and how much valor you get at the start of combat, and then the scarring table, like that all came together. And then I started running for I got into gaming through Palladium games.
Okay.
Heroes Unlimited and Rifts were kind of when a lot of people are like, well, I started on D&D. Like I look back and my nostalgia game is Rifts. I was, explaining this to them and I'm like, wait a second, SDC. So like Rifts has 2 types of damage, right? They have this comes back quickly and you can go all the way to 0 and you're fine.
Yeah.
And then as soon as you start hitting hit points, now you're rolling on like optional damage tables and you're going to bleed out and die. And I'm like, oh, that probably somewhere in the back of my brain
where it came from. Yeah.
Was where it came from. And
but
then,
it works better here, I'll be honest.
I appreciate that. And attacks per melee, right, is like, it's not where it came from. Like, I wasn't consciously thinking about this. But Palladium's combat system works a lot like Jackal's combat system, and the fact that you always have a chance to, like, react. But I really wanted something that was a lot more dynamic, because, again, you read the Iliad, and nobody's like, and then Hector waited around until he stabbed him 3 times. No, it's this back and forth. And so getting that economy to work, as I saw it in my head, there are a lot of spreadsheets, just a lot of spreadsheets to like.
I really liked it because it gives the illusion of kind of D&D, kind of lots of hit points combined with that kind of RuneQuest lethality.
Yes.
I mean, obviously, 3rd edition RuneQuest, they tried to bring in fatigue, but no one ever used it because it was far too complicated and it wasn't properly integrated. So, but this actually does it, which I think is really, really good.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, it works really well. And I think, in terms of the amount of time you spend in combat, I mean, for me as a GM, I mean, I'm happy with combats lasting as long as they need to last, as long as everyone's having fun. But when they just drag on and they're just, for me, it hits a sweet spot. So yes, combat takes time. Okay, you can spend a good 30-40 minutes in a combat, but it's all fun. And so he talked about the interplay with things like clash points and things, and the multiple attacks that creatures can generate. It can get a bit hairy in terms of keeping track of that's an attack, and Foundry's great because you set up different modules. I use the Star Trek initiative tracker for that one. It's an interesting module because you can sort of call out this character's acted at various times. But
we need to talk about this. I run my Jackals, so I'm playtesting. I want to produce a Jackals supplement called Vendom, which is going to be based more off the Aeneid.
Wow.
So basically the Melkoni, because I keep hinting about this war of the city-states.
Okay.
It's the Trojan War. And so my group is actually playing through, they've landed in this new area and they're trying to see if they can establish a new kingdom.
Cool.
Like I still do, even though we play on Foundry, I do so much of the bookkeeping by hand. So I would love to talk with you about the modules that you have found.
I will show you my setup at some point. We'll do a sort of a separate call and show you how it works. Yeah. But and how I manage clash points and things. Combat, it's good. The only comment I'd make is that, I mean, you talked about using lots of spreadsheets. Some of the clash point costs are a little bit. I mean, I can change this stuff myself really, but things like standing up costs you 3 clash points, which seems a bit much. And then we were talking about the impact of light and darkness. On the one hand, combat is quite heroic and there's lots of jumping around and clash points, etc. But actually in darkness can be a major issue and it can really, and I think I've been probably overly generous in that because we've halfway through the Fall of the Children of Bronze campaign. We're going to probably pick it up in the sort of the autumn and the winter, and I've said I want to be much stricter with darkness, and they're not happy with it. My players are not happy with that.
We were laughing because how do you carry a torch if you're carrying 2 scimitars? It's fine for my Mercani because I can have a bucket on my shield that will carry a torch, but it slightly restricts your or if you've got a bow, if you're really an archer, how the hell are you carrying a torch?
Like that was intentional because as I was doing so much research into the Bronze Age, man, light was a resource that we just take for granted compared to them, right? Like sun went down.
Yeah, everything stopped.
Yeah.
Everything stopped.
This is why wars stopped over winter, isn't it? Because there wasn't enough light, basically.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is, Jam, that when we restart the campaign, I need to absolutely make sure I stringently apply the light rules. So that's what I've got to do.
The players need to make sure that they have a Kahar who can do the light of the dawn ritual and keep. That's
what Kat was saying. So Kat, one of our players.
My wife plays a Luati. She's just become a ritualist. So
Or they just released
a new Melkoni and a new Luathi ritualist path.
Okay.
So the Melkoni now have access to the rites of Henton, who is essentially the Poseidon analog.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And then I hinted at them in Travelers on the War Road that there is this like martial order in the Citadel who kind of protect the Hashirs called the Kari.
Okay.
And they're now available. And so they're a very martial, like they're using their staff and they have all of these rights to like empower their staff or guard people, or if they have a way to break their staff in a very staff of the Magi kind of like, so I got the one right I get a lot of flack for is the Trouge right that basically is like, hey, for 8 rounds, you are an invincible guy, and then you die.
That's good though.
I don't
like
care.
that. That's
I
heroic.
love it.
Yeah.
And I've had many people play that ritualist pack, and I've had several of them like have not been able to use the right. Like they tried to use it and it failed. And I've had one person hold a door for all 8 rounds of combat while the rest of the party escaped.
Yeah.
And it worked just the way I wanted it to.
Brilliant.
And,
I mean, I'd be inclined if somebody did that. I'm not familiar with the right. In fact, our Trouge player was reading through the right saying before. I'm not sure about some of these, but I think I'd be inclined to give retirement benefits. If somebody did that, I'd say, yeah, you get the bonus from doing that. But I think that sort of stuff's really cool. Really,
Hate Beyond Life is what it's called.
Excellent.
It specifically says they may not spend a fate point to save themselves. But I think if I ever do a second edition, I'm going to incorporate that rule. I think like going out like that, full retirement benefits is definitely...
Because it's your story, isn't it? You know, and it would inspire others.
I used to have that in a game called Bushido, where basically if your character died with honor, it would improve your next character because they were considered to be a reincarnation of the previous character.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
The way I GM is highly influenced by Legend of the Five Ring and John Wick's sort of play dirty design style. So all of my players, and I run too many games a week. Currently, I'm running 3.5 games a week because we meet every other week.
So go on. So what are the games? Just the games you're running at the moment, then?
Oh, I was gonna say like they all know if they come to me and they're like, this is what I want. And my character, I'm willing to give up my character's life for it. As soon as they're like, I'm willing to like die for this, I'm like, let's make this happen.
Yeah. How can you not?
Yeah. I run a Tales of the Valiant game for a group of kids at my local comic book store every other week. Okay. And we're switching over to Savage Worlds this summer. We're going to play like every week this summer. And I just put on pause for a variety of playtests and health reasons. I was running, like I said, a Jackals game, and then I had a Hyperborea 3rd edition game. And we had some, like, it was just a good time to pause the campaigns because we had a couple of people in each group who had to step away and we got new people in. Yeah. And so I gave them a bunch of options. And weirdly, like, this is my, like, I'm living the dream in my head. Both groups picked Palladium Fantasy. And so they're both groups are in the same kingdom. Right. And both groups know that the other group exists. Yeah. And
holds up first edition. No, it's a revised edition Palladium role playing. Haven't played it for 35 years.
It's such a good game. Like, it's such a good world. Like, the game I really enjoy. I think honestly most people's complaints I hear about the game would be solved by just reorganizing the book and like doing a major editing reorganization path. But the great thing is, so I've got both of my gaming groups, my Tuesday and Wednesday night gaming group, basically only have to prep once a week for it. Okay. Because with like they're both in the Timuro Kingdom. They're right now within 100 miles of each other. And so that's just great. And then I run a Savage Worlds game or playing a Savage Worlds game depending on the week on Friday nights. So
cool. Plenty going on in that case then.
Plenty going on.
Yeah, plus also obviously producing stuff as well. So you've obviously touched on the fact that, I mean, one of the questions we had is, are there more rights in the works? Yes, is the answer, because there's some out there as well. Yeah. And I think we were talking about this as we really like the character advancement and the chance you could sort of buy talents as well. That's quite cool. Yes. And I think it was Martin who plays our Trouge character Ocker was saying that it'd actually be nice to have some talents that are specific to cultures. Is that a thing?
I like that idea a lot. And so my goal is this year to put out one PDF a month. And if they do well, Osprey has said maybe, this is not a promise anybody.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah. Talks about like a Jackals annual where we'll collect all of those things.
Okay.
And I've got a friend of mine who's doing art for all of these. So far, we've put out a monster PDF, 2 monster PDFs, 2 ritualist PDFs, and now we're going to have a rite coming out. But my big excitement is I'm doing a whole new culture, like with brand new rites, 2 new ritualist paths. They're called the Sinaeans, and they're not quite pure Scythians, but there was this group of Scythians who existed on the edge of Greek territories. Mm-hmm. And they were actually called the milk drinkers because they were basically, and one of my great loves is the Malazan Books of the Fallen. And so I love Troll Sengar, and kind of talks about this. And so when I was reading this in history, there was this group of, essentially, you would have Scythians who came to Greek colonies and had bastards.
Okay.
And then you would have like Greeks who would interact with the Scythian writers and have bastards. So you would have these like half Greek, half Scythians, and no one liked them. And so they were called the milk drinkers.
Okay.
And so this whole new culture is going to be based off the Scythians. I've got a ritualist path that's based off the Amazon.
Right.
So it's female only ritualist path.
Okay.
And then I have one that's based off of the idea of like sin eaters, where basically I've had 3 people play them and everyone's like, listen, I'm going to play test this for you, but I don't think I'm going to like it.
Okay.
Because all of their rites cause corruption.
I love it, because we haven't done an awful lot of corruption in our game. I think that's something else I need to do more darkness issues and also more corruption.
But the neat thing is they basically gain protection versus corruption by killing corrupt creatures.
Oh, wow.
So if you kill enough of them in a day, you may be able to offset your corruption that you have gained by using your rights.
Yes.
And so it's this kind of push and pull. I wanted to try something with the mechanics. So that's probably my July. So there's going to be like talents and rights and write-ups of so basically everything you have in the core book for the 4 core cultures, there's now a 5th culture that's going to be coming up.
Brilliant. Okay.
But I love the idea of culture-specific talents. I just need to figure out how I would do that or what I would want. I actually have, and it was cut from the core book, and I think it was a wise decision. Mm-hmm. But I have cultural weapon talents. So if you're a Melkoni and you're fighting with spear and shield,
like Odysseus
you
does,
can take a talent, give you the phalanx ability. So if you're standing with somebody else with a spear and shield, you basically increase your protection and get a special clash point reaction. And wisely, I think, Osprey was like, listen, we got to cut something because you're over your words. And this is so fiddly. Let's take this out from the core book.
I mean,
but it still exists.
Okay. I mean, we had a discussion. Well, I had a point about. So you obviously cut that out, which sounds really cool, and you left in something which is cool, but possibly not as cool. The calendar thing. I just wonder. There's an awful lot of. And Kat really likes the calendar, by the way. So this is, and I don't dislike it, and I'm not vexed. But I'm just saying, I think it's just a choice, isn't it? Really, as to you took that out because I love a phalanx. I'm less enamoured of calendars. But anyway, I'm just wondering because that was a choice that you made to leave that in there. So.
Well, because there's I think that was for me, it was really important when I was running the game because things like festivals are so important and the seasonal actions, which is really a throwback to both RuneQuest and Pendragon. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're going to steal from the best,
of course,
kind of, my thought. And so, the calendar was in there and the moon cycles. Yeah. Anybody who asks, because a lot of people ask me, how do you track the moon cycles? There's a website called Donjon. Yeah. Like Dungeon, but Donjon. And he has a fantasy calendar, and I will send you the code so that you can just import the code to their calendar, and it shows you the phases of all of the moons. It's got all of the months. It's got the festivals in there, and you can just say, well, now I'm on year 3 of my campaign. That's click, 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 and now I know what moons are in the sky and what phase. Because there are some, I give you simple, just roll a couple of D12s, but there are some rights that depend on where the moon is at. For the Hashir.
I think probably part of my issue is because I was running it on Foundry and trying to put in simple calendar on Foundry. Just go,
I have it in simple calendar. If I can export it, I will send it to you.
Please do, because do you know what? I can't. I'm going to spend far too much time on Foundry as it is. And so that was just, I chose to set up isometric figures for all the opponents first of all, so do all that instead. Okay, no, I mean, fair enough. Obviously it's important to you to go, it's a choice, and that's fine. It is. It's your game at the end of the day. So
I feel like the best thing in the book is the Gazetteer, because I kept it really small and tight, so it's
Yeah.
really digestible, but
Yeah.
there's like all of the little secrets.
Yeah.
And so like I'm like, I've saved space on that, so let's just put a bunch of calendars.
You treated yourself with a calendar.
That's
Why
right.
not? Why
It
not?
was my reward
Of
for
course.
being so succinct in other places.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I mean, especially the Gazetteer specifically. I mean, because I say we're into the For the Children of Bronze, I love that campaign. It's great. My complaint, and this is a complaint, right, is it splits in two. Okay, right?
It does.
And there's some brilliant scenarios in the north and the south. So this lot, we did all the scenarios in the south, and I said, they got sent by Baton Nafar to go to the north to spy. So then they got to play the northern adventure as well. So
awesome.
So I thought that because I think they're just so cool. I don't want to miss them out. But anyway, there you go. So
did they save the SAR?
They did save the SAR, but but they did it with Hessoa that had been taken without the good wishes of the. I can't remember the spirit that was looking after them.
Yeah,
so
the spirit.
So the SAR is a bit grumpy at the moment, but yeah, that's fine.
That was my Nebuchadnezzar.
Okay. Right. Yeah, but that stuff's great. So yeah, but I mean the Gazetteer, obviously that really comes into its own in that whole politics thing sort of comes through as well. But yeah, it's brilliant.
Well, there is a sequel. Like when I originally pitched Fall of the Children of Bronze, so Osprey wanted me to do the core rulebook and Fall of the Children of Bronze kind of concurrently. And I started writing Fall of the Children of Bronze, and I went to Osprey and I was like, so I know that I promised you an adventure book with, I mean, how many? There's 14 scenarios.
There's a lot, and there's some really good ones in there.
I originally promised 30 because it was supposed to be Fall of the Children of Bronze and then Rise of the Gates of the East.
Wow. Okay.
So Rise of the Gates of the East is the second campaign book that I'm working on.
Okay.
There's so much I want to do with Jackals.
Yeah.
It's one of those weird things. This may sound, I'm not trying to be arrogant. I'm just, every time I go to run Jackals, I sit down and I start getting back into it. I'm like, man, this feels like a game that was designed specifically for me. Oh, wait.
It was.
It was. It does everything that I want a role-playing game to do.
I was just going to say, your new Jackals books and parts and things, where can we find those? Are they on Drive-Thru or are they on the Osprey website? Or?
They're on the Osprey website. They're on Drive-Thru PDF. You can order the books on Amazon as well. The new stuff that I'm putting out, and if you want, I can provide links. I don't know if you guys do show notes.
Yeah, I'll add those in, yeah.
We do, yeah.
But those are all on Drive-Thru. Basically, the goal is, so if is it okay if I plug?
Yeah, please do. Okay. Yeah, by all means, absolutely. Plug away as much as you like.
Patreon kind of supports the shows that I do, and just doesn't matter what level you support the Patreon at, you get the Jackals PDFs for free. So cool. Every month I send out complimentary copies to all of my patrons. Whether you back at $1 or you back higher than that, you get so it saves you a little bit if you like Jackals. But it's something that I wanted to do, and I wanted to be able to support the line. So at the end of May, I'm putting out I had to put a content warning on the Monsters of TM because of eyes where nipples should be on sea creatures. And just wanted to make sure that
that's chaotic.
Knew that
that's fine.
A piece of art.
Yeah.
But this next the adventure I'm going to release in May is a really, really dark adventure based off of so if you're a fan of the Trouge and you've read Travelers on the War Road, you know that Trouge trap demonic spirits in their dreams.
Okay.
And so I'm writing an adventure right now where the Jackals have to deliver basically the person who is going to keep this demon trapped in their dreams for the next 5 years.
Right. And
they have to get them there in time, and then they've got to go onto the dream road to kind of help the transition because the people who were supposed to deliver this person are killed by Khan. It starts right in the middle of a fight.
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, if you're Jackals, if you feel like they're running a little long, don't forget the morale rules.
Yes.
Rules are there to kind of help. This is the one thing I don't want to say hate about D&D combat because when I run D&D, I'm running second edition is about as new of D&D as I get. I run a lot of Axe and Hyperborea, and actually I have once a year I have a bunch of my old gaming group. They come out to my house and we play 2E for 4 days. They took morale out, and suddenly people are since third edition, people are complaining about how long fights go. And I'm like, well, there's a simple rule. We take care of it.
Yeah, we do use the morale rules. Although to be fair, we have had quite a few combats where the opponents have just fumbled, fallen over. So we had one combat. There were 3 Mavakan and what's the Jackal.
Hyena one.
Yeah, the hyena one.
The Oraticon?
Yeah, that's the guy. and they just, it's almost like the characters stood and watched them as they like fell over each other and poked. It's like the Three Stooges. Ridiculous.
Yep.
So yeah, but no, we do use the morals. It does make it. I mean, to be honest, the combats are intricate enough. They don't take too long. I mean, I've tried to run.
That's always the goal.
Yeah, against the Dark Master on Foundry, and it took a bit long in terms of combats.
So I love Against the Dark Master,
Yeah.
but there are two games that I think I would only ever run on Foundry. I would not try to run at the table.
Yeah.
And that's Against the Dark Master, and if I ever run 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons again. Both of those, like, just the fact that when I'm playing versus Dark Master on Foundry, somebody can make their roll and then go, oh, it's against this type of armor. Let me, oh, look, it applies the wounds. Let me roll on the critical table.
Yeah.
And it just
does it for you. Yeah. So no, I mean, we haven't had any complaints about combat taking too long. Usually it's like too deadly, or that's not fair, Steve.
That's fair.
It's too dark, or whatever it might be. So obviously, you know, Jackals is living on, which is great. So you talked about the stuff you're developing. You obviously would. I think every designer would like to do a second edition or a revised edition of their game. Is that something that's likely on the cards down the line?
Now.
Yeah.
If I were to do something that was a revised version of the game, it would probably be Vendom at this point, which is, I mean, it's still in the Jackal. It's still in Calypsis. It's just farther west, and probably a little bit closer to the Iron Age, right? End of the Bronze Age, start of the Iron Age.
Okay.
One of the nice things is, again, because of the deal I have with Osprey, I'm allowed to publish anything I want using the Clash system.
Okay.
And so there's a couple of silly things that I tried to fix in Travelers on the War Road. Like Kevin over at Dungeon Musing was like, hey, how much is a quiver?
Yeah.
How did I forget to put a quiver in this book? In the PDF I just released, I put drowning and swimming rules in because
yes. Okay.
But the things that I want to expand on, like I really want to expand on things like I want to expand the seasonal actions more. Because one thing I keep hearing is like, well, what if my players don't want to build a house? What if they want to build like a colony? Oh, that's a great idea. Like, let me put some rules around that. I now have rules for building a monument stone, essentially, so that as your Jackals invest in this monument stone, new Jackals start with more advancements because
brilliant.
You're honoring the dead, people are like, well, those are the people I want to go adventuring with.
Yeah.
So you're attracting essentially a higher quality of Jackal as opposed to people who are just like out there for the first time.
Of course. I don't think there's a official errata document, or I don't think I've missed it.
It's on the BRP forum, isn't it?
Yeah, when
answered some questions on the BRP.
You did, yeah, and I grabbed that and put that into a separate document. But I mean, again, it would be lovely when you do all this additional stuff. Just that collected errata would be fucking. That would be great as a request.
Yeah,
but,
no, 100%.
Yeah. So the future. Obviously, you talked a little bit about Amboria, which the Kickstarter is just sort of, I think, going to deliver, and obviously that uses the Clash system. So Jackals is living on. What are you working on? What are you working on next? What's your next thing that you want to get into?
We actually launch on Tuesday. Strange Owl Games is in partnership with a couple of other companies, and we're doing the 5th edition update for World's Largest Dungeon, which is the old project.
I think I saw that because I bought the original World's Largest Dungeon many years ago. We played through it. Yeah, so
I ran it in the most convoluted and crazy way possible, but it was a ton of fun.
We had fun with Minotaur space because, of course, it was all 5 foot squares, and there were all these Minotaurs kind of squeezing through tunnels. So every time we had a large monster, it was like Minotaur space, and all the squares suddenly became 10 feet.
That's right, exactly. This summer, hopefully, maybe this fall, my publishing company, we're going to publish a new version of Timothy Brian Brown's Dragon Kings.
Okay.
With its own kind of bespoke system for that.
Okay.
And then currently, I'm in the process of doing a sci-fi game that uses the Clash rules.
Okay.
And all I can say about that is the first time one of the NPCs threw a plasma grenade at the PCs, and one guy was out of Clash points. So everyone else dodged away, and this poor bastard took a plasma and died.
And that was it.
Just no way to dodge it. We were like, okay, we got something here. This is going to be a fun game. And so it's going to have a couple of, it's probably going to use something closer to the Urban Decay character creation rules.
Okay.
So the one comment I got about Jackals, and this was a feature, not a bug in my mind, is that it takes a little while to make a character. There's a little bit of math involved.
It's not that hard. We were saying
You thought it was really easy. You thought it was great.
Like, this is what I heard. So I made a little life path system for Urban Decay
Uh-huh.
that worked out well. And so I think we're gonna do a life path system for the sci-fi game where you as a group, everybody's making their individual choices, and then there's going to be a crew stage where you're like, okay, I'm going to pick the pilot role, and I'm going to get a bonus to these 3 skills, and I'm going to pick another player, and they're going to get half that bonus because like we met in piloting school, and I was obviously the better pilot, but I brought you along, and then you get to pick, okay, well, I'm going to pick the gunner role, and I got to pick another person. And so we've got some crew cohesion rules that we're playtesting through right now, which seemed like people are enjoying.
So one of the things we liked about Jackals was the fact that the characters are all individuals, all outsiders from different cultures. They're almost like work colleagues kind of thrown together. It's not like RuneQuest where you have to develop this huge background of like, I'm your cousin and we all come from this village and stuff. It's like you can just turn up and be an individual. And
the sci-fi game, is that going to be a Kickstarter, or is that going to be published?
At this point, it's probably going to be a Kickstarter, but kind of we learned a lot of lessons with Space 1889 and Amboria. And so our motto, our internal goal, anytime we are doing Kickstarters now, is that the writing has to be completely done. Like, we're not going to Kickstarter until it is in editing. And now that we've had a couple of successful Kickstarters, we're actually ordering art in advance. So our goal is, as soon as the Kickstarter funds, and for like most people, that's usually 2 weeks after the Kickstarter ends. So as soon as we get the money from the Kickstarter, our goal is to always send out either a laid out version of the game without art, or at least an edited version of the game, so that that 2 weeks after you back a Strange Owl Kickstarter, that game is in your hands ready to go. And that, it may take, another 6 to 8 months to finish up the art and get it through printing and out. But we're doing offset printing, which is, an interesting thing to be doing. We'll just say.
I don't know anything about that. I mean, the end result's great, but I'm sure the process is
just it's just terrible. So, we'll probably kickstart that. I would like to get to the point where we weren't kickstarting every game, but there's just something my company is myself, my art director, and my business partner, and then a bunch of freelancers. So it's not like we're a small company. So Kickstarter kind of allows us to, 1, see if people are interested in the game that we're putting out. Yeah. And 2, then, really, like, we don't use Kickstarter as a pre-order system. We really use Kickstarter as hey, this game won't come out unless you guys want to do it. Yeah. And we try and put a lot of that back into the book. So upgrading the cover and putting end papers in. That's one thing. If I do a new version of Jackals, I really want to put all of the useful tables. That
was my comment. It would be great. It'd be great to have that stuff in there.
There is a Lore Masters reference document on the Osprey.
Okay. I ended up making my own.
Like 20 pages of charts.
But it's just one of those things that makes it easy to run the game.
Yeah.
But so when you do finally that science fiction game comes to Kickstarter, let us know, and we'll do our best to amplify it, because really enjoy the core system. Be interested to see. I need to pick up Urban Decay because I wasn't familiar with that, and now that's another game that's going to have to go on my shelf, and henceforth will have to be played. That's the rules. Them's the rules. I don't make them. So, but anyway, thanks, JM, for your time. It's been great, and thanks. We've really enjoyed Jackals. We'll be going back to it again, I'm sure, to fit to.
I can't wait to hear how it goes.
Yeah, great stuff.
And then, if anybody ever has questions about Jackals, I am on the Osprey Discord, and the only channel that I keep unmuted is the Jackals.
Yeah, I've got that pinned on my Discord as well.
So if you ever have any questions, please reach out to me. I would love to answer them, and I love talking Jackals.
Cool. All right, brilliant. Thanks again for your time. Take it easy.
Thanks very much.
See you. Cheers. Thank you for listening to another exploration of my gaming vexes. If you've got any thoughts you'd like to add to what you've heard here, or a gaming vex of your own you'd like to offer up for discussion, you can get in touch with me on Blue Sky via orlanth.bsky.social or via Discord at orlanth.vex. Until next time, may all of your games be free of vexatiousness and be excellent to each other always.